to Sudan's RSF rebels to set shop in Nairobi and form a parallel government. In what may lead to severe geopolitical ramifications, Dr. Nathan Wangusi, a social justice organizer, will shortly join us to break down how the presence of Janjaweed in Nairobi may impact Kenya. We'll also revisit the political landscape following Raila Odinga's loss to Djibouti's foreign minister in the AUC leadership race. Will Baba endorse Ruto come 2027? Want you to keep it locked to find out. And then we'll also discuss the federal government layoffs in DC. Any of you living in Washington, DC knows what's been happening around the area. Then there's the death of immediate former IEBC Chair Wafula Chebukati, and PS, who embarrassingly shared an AI-generated deep fake video. So buckle up and start typing in the comment section. It is Friday the 20th of February. Namelia MV the People's Kamkunji Inangoananga. Na mimi ni Ali Badawi aka mjukuu wa Masai. And this is the One Mic Show. Nataka kuwakaribisha na wakaribisha tena ndani ya One Mic Show. Na of course ni furaha kujiunga nanyi wapenzi wasikilizaji, tukiwa tumekuandalia taarifa za kusisimua, mziki wa kata viungo na kindumbwe cha siasa au politics ukipenda. We are streaming live on Facebook from Kilimanjaro Studios outside Washington, D.C. And we are live on YouTube. We're unfortunately not going to be on Facebook because we've been having some technical issues with Facebook. Hopefully it will be fixed by next week. And please remember to subscribe to all our social media handles. That's on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We are also taking live calls. The number to call is 202-683-4570. And then press star 5 to speak. I want you to save that number. The number again is 202-683-4570. Press a star 5 to speak. Now later tonight, like I said earlier, we'll revisit Kenya's political landscape following Raila Odinga's loss to Djibouti's foreign minister in the AUC leadership race. We'll try to find out how this may impact Baba's next move. Will Baba endorse President William Ruto come 2027? Now, feel free to start dropping comments below and let us know where you're tuned in from and what you think Kenya's, or rather, where you think Kenya's politics is headed to. Bila kusahau, mziki tunapokea toka DJ wetu machachari, mleta habari DJ Omosh Fire, na kudunda kule viwanjani na Mika Och, jezi nambari 7 mgongoni, akituletea habari za michezo. Na moja kwa moja toka Kilimanjaro Studios, ni mimi mtangazaji na mwanahabari wako mpendwa Ali Badawi. Kwetu wananiita mteule na wengine niite mjukuu wa Masai, because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, and Masai by choice. Sichagui, sikagui, na sibagui. Karibuni.
Now, let's talk politics.
Now, this hour we'll be talking about President Ruto's endorsement of Sudan's RSF rebels. What does it mean when a foreign rebel force sets up shop in your country? Dr. Nathan Wangusi is joining us tonight to break this down. So I want you to start dropping comments below and tell us, first of all, where you're tuned in from and what you think about this. And of course, I'm your host and producer, Ali Badawi. It's Friday the 20th of February, and we are streaming live from Kilimanjaro Studios outside Washington, D.C. Please remember to follow us, The One Mic Show, on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. And on panel with me tonight is Mr. One Mic Kamakawa. Our sports anchor, Mika Och, will be joining us later. And our resident DJ Mosh Fire is also in the building tonight. And not forgetting, super producer is none other than Mubelo Abandio. So we are all tuned in on YouTube. Unfortunately, Facebook is still not working. I can see Washeke is already in the building. So Washeke, call all your friends, because we are not on Facebook. We are trying to get that. Fixed. And yeah, and we're looking forward to getting your comments and knowing what you think, because we're gonna have a very amazing show tonight, and we're gonna get started right away. And now, in a move that's shaking the region, and then I think before we get started, Cheke is saying she's tuned in from Doge. I thought that was Dog 3, but I think it's Doge. Yeah, so she's
Doge.
She's tuned in from Doge. So I think sijui kama mpata kazi yuko, but you let us know. But back to the topic today, in a move that's shaking the region, President Ruto has given Sudan's RSF rebels the green light to set up shop in Nairobi, essentially allowing them to form a parallel government on Kenyan soil. Now, with the former Janjaweed in Nairobi, is this just a strategic gamble or a potential powder keg? Could this potentially explode with serious economic and political consequences for Kenya and beyond? What does Janjaweed setting up shop in Nairobi mean for the average Kenyan? Because I think most of the average Kenyans are not maybe aware or familiar what the implications of this might be, but could we be staring at a geopolitical disaster? Now, joining us tonight for this compelling conversation is once again our leading social justice organizer, Dr. Nathan Wangusi. Now, of course, Dr. Wangusi is no stranger to Kilimanjaro Studios. He's here to break down the chaos, the risks, and the potential global backlash that this may lead to. Dr. Wangusi, karibu sana. How are you doing today?
I think he's on mute.
I think you're on mute. You need to unmute.
On mute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks. Sorry, I wasn't able to come to studio today, but as always, it's a pleasure even to be there virtually. At least now we know that I can make it even if I don't have to, if I can't or I don't have to drive all the way. So that's a good thing. It's just been a week. A lot has happened this week. I had a very interesting week, and I'll share some of the stories that I think are relevant to some of the discussions that we're going to have today. But I spent the week on the Hill. Spent a lot of time in Congress doing some work related to advocating for water innovators. But along the way, some of the discussions around the geopolitics and the positioning of the US government, both strategically from the perspective of this new dispensation of isolationism and the impact that it's having around the world, came up. And in fact, some of the discussions around what is happening in the Congo, what is happening in Sudan, the impact that the withdrawal of US aid from the world is going to have were definitely in play. Obviously, USAID, people forget that it's also a federal agency. It is a federal employee, so it's part of the discussion that we need to have. But I think closer to home, we've been playing this geopolitical game with a lot of our neighbors. I think there's a couple of things here that I'm generalities that I'm observing, which is one, African countries are becoming more assertive in terms of thinking about their own solutions to regional problems. I think the conflagration that you're seeing in Kenya, Sudan, Congo with Rwanda with SADC, that's just it's an indicator that the African community, the African Union, African regional blocs are beginning to assert themselves in terms of seeking solutions for their own problems. I don't know if you noticed that Marco Rubio, just yesterday, on behalf of the US government, applied sanctions on certain individuals in Rwanda, which was not, it was received kind of lukewarm in the way that, the kind of influence that you saw the US have maybe 10 or 20 years ago is waning. So I think generally that's one observation that I think is really meaningful. It's probably a good thing. I mean, conflicts are always going to flare up over land resources, over borders, over geopolitical issues, over our collective or separate identities as Africans, and we need to have mechanisms to resolve those. Unfortunately, in the case of South Sudan, not South Sudan, but in the case of Congo and Rwanda, that has flared up into a full-scale military conflict. And while it's not ideal, military intervention is a mechanism to resolve conflict. So just generally, that's what I'm seeing. But I think we can maybe get into the specifics of what is happening with Sudan. I think that has a bearing to do with what we were talking about last week, which we can also get into. Yes. I've heard from very authoritative sources that some of the posturing that we're seeing by the Kenyan government this week is a result of the failure of us to clinch the seat last week.
Yeah, but now before we get back to ODM leader Raila Odinga failing to clinch the AUC chairmanship seat, losing to the Djibouti foreign minister. Before we get back to that, because there might be some connection with all this geopolitics that's taking place and happening on the African continent. At a very basic level, to the average Kenyan who maybe is not familiar with the politics of Sudan or maybe the recent history, who are the RSF rebels? These ones who are recently hosted in Nairobi, and apparently there is a plan to set up a parallel government in the country. First of all, before we get onto those details, who are they?
To set up a what?
Eh?
A what?
To set a parallel government.
Oh,
Yes.
I had my own place.
Yes. So who are the RSF rebels? Who are they? For the average person who doesn't know who they are.
Yeah, brief history,
Right,
because
so-
I think this is a history that very many people do not know.
Yes.
I think very
Yeah,
many people
yes.
are concerned about Ukraine and Gaza and
Yeah.
whatever, but they don't know what's going on.
But just start with the
Yeah.
current,
Yeah.
like who are the RSF rebels? For just explain it to the average Kenyan to be able to
Yeah.
understand. Because the average Kenyan right now knows that there are these people who came from Sudan, with the invitation from the foreign ministry and the president, and they've set up shop. And they were even to do a press conference. I don't know that they've already done it. And there's talks that they're going to be setting a parallel government. So let's go to you briefly. Who are the RSF rebels?
Well, so the RSF are a paramilitary unit that's supposed to be part of the Sudanese army, and I'll explain in brief why that is. So if we just go back, to where Sudan has come from. If you remember, Sudan until 2010 was what is now Sudan and South Sudan.
Yes.
That was one contiguous country. Like many other African countries, the independence movements from colonial rule ended in the 1950s, early 60s. So Sudan, I think, got their independence sometime in 1959, and set up a civilian government, like most of their compatriots around the region. But they had a very unusual transition into military rule, because the then prime minister, a guy called Khalil, had a coup against himself, which is highly unusual. So he transitioned his government in a self coup, which I don't think has been observed anywhere else in the world, into a military government, because he needed control. And obviously, Sudan is a vast country with an unusually high amount of diversity in terms of ethnicity, religious persuasion, cultural practices. In fact, one of my friends who is South Sudanese told me that Sudan has over 500 different languages, and for reference, Kenya has about 50. So it's a huge country with a lot of people and a lot of different interests as a result of that ethnic diversity. So between the 1950s and the 1980s, there was a series of coups. So there were about 3 different coups where military generals basically usurped each other. So there was Khalil, there was Nimeri, there was a guy called Dahab, and all took over. 1969, there was a military coup, 1985, 1989. And then finally, you had this guy called Bashir, who is the more familiar name for most of us who have grown up in the 80s and the 90s. So Bashir realizes that he has to manage the military leaders that surround him, because taking over a country through a coup and then surrounding yourself obviously with equally ambitious generals and soldiers is a very delicate balance, because obviously there's ethnic considerations to consider, there's power dynamics, there's obviously control of regions, control of wealth. So he for many years managed the coup, or what he called his revolution. He managed these different military factions by playing into ethnic rivalries, At the time, as I said, Sudan was both Sudan and South Sudan. And one of the things that he did to strengthen one of his military alliances with a group of regional militias at the time called the Janjaweed. And they were notorious for both violence, committing extreme acts of violence, and then they were supported by the the Sudanese Air Force in quelling rebellion in South Sudan. And South Sudan versus Sudan, South Sudan has primarily Black African communities like the Nuer, the Dinka, and others. There's many others. So he uses the Janjaweed, who are Arab, Arab descent Sudanese. He uses these militias to quell the uprising in the kind of famous place called Darfur, because that's kind of the region of the country they come from. They come from the west. So the Janjaweed were just militias, a group of militias that he was effectively using for ground assaults. They'd come on horseback, commit atrocities, wipe out villages. In fact, estimates say that they wiped out up to 3,000 villages through this sort of attacks. This war continued from this kind of assault continued from 1989. Then it culminated in 2010 with South Sudan seceding and forming a new nation. In fact, South Sudan is known as the newest country on earth. So what happened was, after all this happened, after the South Sudan breaks away, he's left with these military factions. So he has the army on one side, the Sudanese army on one side, who were supporting the assault on the south. They're the common enemy. They primarily sent heavy artillery as well as the air force, and then you have the ground forces, who are the Janjaweed, who had by this time come together in what he in fact he had formally constituted them as the presidential dogs of war, the rapid support forces. So anytime they needed some really precision attacks on communities in the south, and that is who they used to use. So they were called the rapid support forces. They were under one general. And then on the other side, you had the Sudanese army. So this sort of shaky alliance between the Sudanese army, the RSF, and the military dictator Bashir holds for another 10 years. And then obviously, given now that their common enemy was no longer there, the RSF and the Sudanese army combined forces to usurp their president. So Bashir was usurped, and off he went to face the law. Then he was usurped at the time. This is a couple years ago. If you remember, there was massive protests in Sudan, citizen-led protests, where people, the common mwananchi, as we call them in Kenya, was advocating for a transition to democratic rule. So the generals sort of seized this opportunity. They usurped the president, and then they form a transitional council, promising that they're going to move the country to democratic rule, with obviously, I guess, pressure and support from regional allies. Particularly, Kenya was involved, Ethiopia, the UAE, who they heavily depend for armaments, Saudi Arabia, and then the US was also part of that international consortium of countries trying to force them to the negotiating table. The African Union was also involved. So then this transitional council is formed. It holds for a few months, then it collapses, and it kind of spirals back to what they know best, which is military rule. So obviously there was the head of the army, the Sudanese army, and then the head of the RSF, former Janjaweed, were basically the president and the vice president, and then a power struggle broke out between them. So then a war broke out again, and civilians were caught in that crossfire. So to date, about 150,000 civilians, I think 2.25 million people have been under at risk for starvation. More than 200 million people have been displaced from their homes. So Sudan is currently, facing a civil war in the traditional sense as we know it. Now, there's just a lot of rumor, and nobody quite knows where Kenya got so heavily involved in this civil war in South Sudan. So a couple of things to observe, and I'll hand it back to you shortly. So one, I'm not worried about this, this dalliance between Ruto and the head of the RSF, a guy called Hemeti. So first, standing between Kenya and Sudan is their arch nemesis, South Sudan, right? So already we have that buffer, and also to the north we also have Ethiopia. So it will be very hard, other than sort of diplomatic posturing, the kind of letters and public pronouncements that we've seen. It'll be very hard for for Sudan to mount an assault against Kenya. And then secondly, so someone once told me that when you start a war, dig two graves, right? Because nobody has a monopoly of violence. The Kenyan army is one of the best trained armies in the region. So in terms of sort of deterrence and ability to deal with any military campaign against Kenya, I personally think our forces are pretty well matched, considering that this group would be then fighting against the RSF. If they want to get the KDF involved, South Sudan is also, on standby. The Ethiopians to the north. So I don't think a regional conflict would necessarily be something that would happen. I think a lot of what we're seeing is just political posturing. There's a lot of rumors out there as to why Ruto is causing to Hemeti. A lot of rumors about him having some stake in the gold trade in Sudan. I think it has something to do with the elections last week. That's what I think personally, is going on here.
Okay, now.
Yeah, I can explain, shortly what that is.
Yeah, but quite a number of things to unpack here because there's so much going on. And of course, this is geopolitics that your average Kenyan typically does not follow. So you gave a very good...
We just don't know.
Yes, we don't know. So you gave a very good background, especially of who these RSF rebels are. These ones who were seen who've been seen in Nairobi at KICC, and they were what was formerly the Janjaweed. And you give a very good explanation of where the Janjaweed came from. It was a militia that was initially, government sponsored, and they were just meant to rival the other generals to make sure that things are in check, so that Omar al-Bashir could not be overthrown. And then we went all the way to where South Sudan got their independence and seceded from Sudan. And then now these two forces remained, and then there were protests in Sudan, like Gen Z kind of protests. But then so Omar al-Bashir was taken out of the picture, and then these two generals, one president and one became vice president. Eerily similar to what happened in South Sudan. For those who remember, in South Sudan, when they got independence, Salva Kiir, president, Riek Machar, vice president, and then shortly a few years after, they started going for each other's jugular. So it seems there's a similar pattern in how these conflicts happen, and people had assumed that once this separation happens from what was called the Muslim North and the Christian South, everybody will be happy. But clearly, after that division, it was clear this was not necessarily religious, because now in the South, the Christians were fighting, Christian groups were fighting against Christian groups based on ethnicity. And then now in the North, you have now Muslims fighting against Muslims. So clearly, this is not a religious war as many people think. But now, here's a key question which an average Kenyan here is curious about and is wondering. And you've hinted one or two things here and there. Why has Ruto, let me not even say the Kenyan government, because this is clearly a Ruto mission, why has he chosen to openly take sides? Because Kenya historically has known to be neutral, even in situations where we were not supposed to be neutral. But Kenya has known to be neutral, you know, and it has known to be this place where conflicting neighbors come to solve their differences. But here, he clearly picked a side because the other side is the one that was officially holding the government. They were the ones who had the ambassador, the embassy, because as we speak right now, Sudan has recalled their ambassador. And in diplomatic code, recalling an ambassador is one step towards cutting diplomatic ties. And cutting diplomatic ties is almost akin to declaring war. So what specifically does what is in it for Ruto, you know, or what is it what is in it for Kenya for us to take this very risky geopolitical move, Dr. Wangusi?
Yeah. So there's a couple of theories, and I think most of us wish we could be in the head of Kasongo, figure out why he does what he does, right? Most of us, wonder why he makes the decisions he makes, which hopefully will be strategically good or helpful for Kenya, but also for our regional partners. But I'll tell you what I think. So, first of all, if we're to assume that he's doing this for personal reasons, then there's a couple, and I think there's two that are glaring for me. So the first is last week's election of the next chair of the African Union. He had staked politically a lot on that election. For him personally, Raila winning that election was very beneficial for him in terms of winning the trust and vote of Western Kenya and Nyanza. And the fact that regional blocks, the Sahel region, led by Sudan, I believe, and then the SADC mission, led by South Africa, disrupted that deliberately. Why? Because on the SADC side, they were unhappy that Kenya is not falling in line with their plans for Congo, and on the South Sudanese, on the Sahel side, the Arab African bloc, because Kenya has aligned itself to Israel. Those are the sort of what is said are the reasons why that happened. So he lost that vote because of those machinations, right? And it's becoming obvious that Sudan had a particular stake in that decision to alienate Kenya, because that's what we saw. From the perspective of the Kenyan government was who contributes a lot in peacekeeping in the region, in Sudan, in maintaining good relationships with SADC, with sending intervention forces in Congo, was embarrassed on the world stage. And for a statesman like Raila also to be trumped by a diplomat of no repute, there was a statement that was being made there. And we can't, in good faith, ignore that. So I think that's the first reason. The second reason, which is what Sudan is, if you listen to what the general, I think his name is Burhan, said, is that Ruto has a personal stake with the Hemeti, which is typical when you're trying to attack the other side. Oh, the reason he's doing this is because he has gold deals with this person, and he should stop using our country as a staging point for his personal ambitions. I think it is plausible, but I think unlikely because it's just a personal slight. If you listen carefully to the language that was coming out of Khartoum and the language that's coming out of Congo, they are saying that we will not speak to these people. They are calling their counterparty M23 in the Congo side, RSF in the Sudanese side. They're calling these people terrorists, dehumanizing them. And obviously, because there's this kind of rivalry. But when you start to do that, you're making the chances of peace remote. So I think those are some of the maybe personal reasons or political reasons he would be doing that, is to reassert himself. People say, and I've heard this, on the political arena in Kenya, he's a very vindictive man. He takes things personally, and a young activist sitting out of his bed sitter in Kawangware writes something on social media, and he sends, the army after him, or the intelligence service after him. You can imagine how he feels being embarrassed on the international stage when he's trying to set up Kenya as a regional arbitrator and power. So I think there's a personal motivation there. If it was me sitting in that position, I would want to get back at these people for embarrassing. So that's, I think, on the personal side. On the geopolitical side, which I think is what is more likely, there was a meeting recently with some Arab League countries who are heavily invested in this South Sudanese conflict, and I think he's been sitting for a while on this decision. I don't think this is something that he jumped onto just suddenly. I think he's been sitting on the decision until last week, sort of tripped the switch. If you ask me, I think that's what happened. I think he'd been sitting on the decision to show public support for the RSF, but he had, he didn't have sufficient impetus to do so. So when there was a personal slight, he did what he does best, which is lash out. I think that is what is happening. Okay. But who knows? He might have a stake in a gold mine in Darfur. With Ruto.
All right. Okay. A lot to unpack.
Know, so.
A lot to unpack. Of course, those who are just joining us, this is Dr. Wangusi, breaking down, like what's been happening this week in Kenya. Of course, there was the loss by ODM leader Raila Odinga in the AUC race, and then there was the emergence of the Janjaweed, or the RSF rebels in Nairobi. And the talk is that they're setting up a parallel government in Nairobi. So Dr. Wangusi is just here trying to break down and explain and make Kenyans understand, like what's happening. So I want to bring it back into the studio right now, because there's been so much that has been unpacked. And let me just start with you, maybe with you, DJ Moshfire. What do you make out of what Dr. Wangusi, has been saying in terms of the reasoning behind what many are calling a very dangerous geopolitical move? And I'm going to come to the comments. A lot of comments have been coming in on YouTube. I'm going to be coming to your comments shortly. But DJ Moshfire, what's your take on this? Is this something that you had an idea of, or what is it, that light bulb that has lit in your head from what Dr. Wangusi has been talking about? Omosh.
Asante sana, Daktari. So listening to him break it down on the RSF, the whole Janjaweed thing, Sudan, South Sudan, and the power struggle from within, and then also the regional effect and how it's also then trickled down coming back to Kenya. One thing for sure that has happened since, I think I would venture to say since independence, really, Kenya has always had that stable economy, stable country, other than the hiccup of 82, which and then the violence, or should I say the 07 post-election violence. We've really had a steady hand in terms of our folks. Everything has been a-okay, and Nairobi, aka Kenya, has been that place that you always go to for refuge. With the government at hand now, Ruto taking a stance of holding hands with folks who you'd say are tainted. You could call them all sorts of different names, or there's a question mark behind them. And you have come out, unapologetically and shown your hand that you're in the camp of these guys. You've basically put Kenya in a spot where we are losing and or have lost, or should I say you're showing your arrogance and lack of caring as a fellow citizen of I was going to say East Africa, because we consider Sudan part of East Africa. So for me, this should have gone the diplomatic way, but it didn't. And now it's that one of nimekuja na kifua, and almost akin to that statement of munaniambia nini mimi ndio nimesoma kwani munajua nini. It's I am the president, and it's as I say, not what is right, not what is humanitarianly right, and not what we have been known for, which is being diplomatic, doing things in a certain systematic way, and making sure that you can sit down, negotiate, have conversations. Because if there was to be anything, then he should have been saying, let me host RSF and these other chaps wakae chini pamoja, waonge.
And have they can come and have a conversation in Nairobi.
That did not happen.
That didn't happen, yeah.
You took one side, the whole...
Lakini wamekataa.
No, kama wamekataa, basi mbona unaingililia? Because you can't, ukiingililia na useme, I'm bringing these guys in, then it shows, and from the stance that you have made, it shows that you are wholeheartedly in this with these guys. So does it leave room for anybody else to have a conversation, even though umesema wamekataa? Kukata, normally kuna zile watu wanasema, oh, we're not going to talk, we won't do this, but eventually at some point there's always conversation.
So before we go back to Dr. Wangusi, I want to say something here. The kukata kwao, them refusing, was for a reason, because even before these RSF rebels had been brought to Nairobi, there was clear indication that Ruto had already taken, because he had hosted Hemeti before, well before this time that they came to Nairobi. He had hosted him before. So he clearly showed that there's one side that he's talking to, because the way Nairobi has been doing diplomacy from before, they would of course acknowledge the government that's in power diplomatically, and we would not necessarily be known to host, because even when like South Sudan and the North were feuding before the split, there were emissaries that came from both sides. Garang would come to Nairobi, and emissaries also from the North would come to Nairobi. So here he had already shown, because there was already also a lot of content that we could see about like people in the North, people who are familiar with politics in the northern side, expressing that Kenya, or rather the Kenyan president, has already taken sides. So that's a reason why they refuse. And of course, there's other regional bodies that, like IGAD, that were able to handle this. And if you notice also, all countries that used to come to Nairobi for diplomacy, from South Sudan, Ethiopia, or rather for conflict resolution, they stopped doing that. They now go to Arusha, they now go to Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates. They completely stopped doing that. And I think this breakdown in credibility of Nairobi as a mediating power, I'm not going to say it started during Ruto's time. It may have started during Uhuru's time, but it totally fell apart during Ruto's time, where no one in the region sees Nairobi as a neutral place where they can come to solve this disagreement. So I'll go to you, Dr. Wangusi, and then I'm going to come back to Mike in the studio. Twende kazi, Dr. Wangusi.
So, think about it with respect to the following, which is when you have two warring parties, right? In the conflicts which we are talking about, there's the Sudanese government, which took power through a coup on one side, supported by the RSF on the other side. Those are two very powerful regional armed groups. One which is both of whom are former parts of the former South Sudanese government, right? And then in the case of Congo, which we spoke about last week, there's the M23, and something similar, by the way, remember happened because the M23 were hosted in Nairobi, and there was some kind of overtures, but nothing really happened out of that. What these rivals end up doing, particularly government forces, they call the other side, number one, terrorists, put out a big laundry list of all the atrocities they have committed. I think in both cases have tried to have their rivals tried in international courts. So when you do that, what you're essentially doing to the arbiters, and in this case, you're saying that you want Kenya to be the arbiter, but on your side, the case of Tshisekedi, he's running around European capitals looking for sanctions and aid to be cut to Rwanda and Congo by extension. You see, when you have the counterparty doing those kinds of things, it becomes very difficult to mediate, right? Some of these conflicts, they won't even agree to sit down with each other. So strategically, what would you do? And it's not an easy decision to make, if you ask. I think it's a very smart decision, but a very difficult decision to make. Now that the Kenya government has recognized that the RSF is a valid actor in this conflict, they're not, they are responsible for atrocities, but that's not the issue. The issue is that you want to have a roadmap towards peace. And unless the other side recognizes it, recognizes the right to exist of this other group, there's no way you're going to have any mediation. So what a smart negotiator or mediator would do is recognize this other group and say, the RSF is a bona fide military actor. They have a stake in this conflict, both on a personal level, but also on as a community, because the Janjaweed represent an ethnic coalition that the other side were predominantly Arab, as opposed to more darker communities down in Darfur, think that by virtue of their ethnicity and by virtue of their privileged position, that they can look down upon South Sudan, look down upon RSF, not have to make any compromises. So in terms of just positioning, I think it's a very smart thing to do in a negotiation, because now what the South Sudanese government has to do is they have to negotiate.
So let me ask a quick question here.
I think there's a play there that's very difficult to see, but it can be very also effective.
Okay, let me ask a quick question here. Let's take an example of, and this may be different circumstances of our neighbor, Somalia, whereby they have a militia that has been operating for a while, Al-Shabaab. So, yes. and they've been fighting government forces, and they've also been committing atrocities, maybe at a grander scale, but they've also been committing atrocities, just like the Janjaweed has been committing atrocities in the northern side of Sudan. So if you have a neighboring country, let's not even say, not even necessarily Kenya, that invites Al-Shabaab and tells them, you guys come, and then we are gonna recognize you as a legitimate force because this other side has refused to negotiate. Would you say that's a smart strategic move, or what exactly would you call that? or how different is this from the Sudan situation?
So I think let's just make the
because when you think about it, 150,000 people have lost their lives in this current conflict in Sudan, and before that, there was also a number of people who had lost their lives attributed to the Janjaweed. So I'm just trying to think, would you also call that a strategic move?
No, so let's first make a distinction here, because I think the rules differ slightly. Al Qaeda, and its affiliate Al Shabaab, these are terrorist organizations. That's their stated goal. They are not fighting for self-determination. These are their ideology and strategic goals are very, very different. So there's a bit of distinction there.
I'll stop you for a minute there. That's not that's what they've been labeled to do, but what Al Shabaab themselves are saying, they're also saying that they're fighting for self-determination. What they themselves
that
are
is
saying.
true.
Yeah. So
and obviously they align themselves to some of these movements for support, for money, and the like. So I think I agree with you on that. But the recognizing of the counterparty, because for any negotiation, we're not talking about a negotiation between the Sudanese army and RSF, just any negotiation between rivals who are fighting at that scale. These are very powerful, very well-armed military groups and militias on both sides. In fact, if you look at the map of conquest, the rapid support forces control nearly half of the country, right? And there's been various offensives to Khartoum, where at some point the RSF held it, then the government and the RSF. So they've been juggling. So this is not a small ragtag army. It's a very well-oiled, very powerful machine that you cannot ignore, right? And what the South Sudanese government is currently doing, or the South Sudanese army, they are trying to invalidate their right to existence. Therein is where your problem is, right? So and by the way, we are saying we don't know. We are, all of us are just postulating here as to why we think Ruto is doing this, because surely he's not doing this just to get a few bars of gold, right? There must be some geopolitical play, which we can try and explain given what we know. There's also there are also other players who have very strong influence on us, namely the US on one side, and then RSF's allies, because one of the things these generals have done exceptionally well, both of them, by the way, both Hermeti and Burhan have been to Arab League countries doing shuttle diplomacy. One goes to Qatar, the other one goes to South Sudan, to Saudi Arabia. The other goes to UAE, another one goes to Jordan. So they've done a lot of diplomacy to bring in resources for their war. The other thing, the RSF would also send mercenaries in their ranks to go and fight insurgencies around the Middle East. I don't know if that is something we've mentioned. So they are very deeply embedded, not just in the country, but also in the region. So not only are they getting very well armed, not only do they have a lot of resources, both from their gold mines, but also from their allies. These are not people you can ignore, right? And a person like Ruto, or the Kenya government for that matter, while positioning its foreign policy towards these countries, can also not afford to ignore them, right? The other side is saying, ignore these people, but you cannot afford to ignore them. So I think what is eventually going to happen, given that South Sudan now can position and start saying, oh, there are going to be consequences to Kenya. What consequences? Me personally,
South Sudan, or you're talking about the
I'm talking about Sudan.
Okay.
I'm talking about Sudan threatening Kenya with consequences. What are you saying? That you're going to start a war with Kenya? We don't have a monopoly of violence. If they can't even manage their own internal affairs, how are they going to deal with a professional army like the KDF, right?
Okay.
With all these allies. So there's also that statement that we need to make clearly. Kenya should not be that country that everybody thinks they can run over and step over and insult and toss around because we are peaceful.
Another thing I'll push back, Dr. Wangusi, before we come back to Mike in the studio. You've talked about KDF and being the best trained military in the region, which is possibly true. But here's my concern when it comes to conflict with Kenya. Conflicts, I feel from my view, conflicts have always favored the people who have experience more than, because in Kenya we have very good training, but as far as experience with war, we have experience with peacekeeping missions, and we don't have experience with war like our neighboring countries have. We don't have the experience that the Ethiopians have. We don't have the experience that both South and North Sudan have. And I get concerned when it comes to war, that sometimes, like experience might prevail over training. And another thing that also concerns me about war is that these are the countries, like every country has a lot to lose in war. But because Kenyans, we also don't have experience with such wars, at least in our lifetimes. We have way much more to lose. So in case a conflict comes in, because the other thing that I'm also seeing is that there's a lot of proxy powers that are involved, some directly, some indirectly. You have Saudi Arabia, you have United Arab Emirates with interest there, you to some extent you have Qatar, and all these are working on behalf of some other superpower. You have Russia's Wagner Group also involved. You have the United States directly involved, because you will remember at the very beginning, the US recalled their ambassador at the very beginning, before everything went down. So there's also this argument that there's some control coming indirectly from the superpowers through these other smaller powers in the Middle East, and through groups like the Wagner Group. But these are just some of the things that concern me, especially when we take a move that could potentially result in a war, and we are a country where our military doesn't have an experience with that kind of war, and the population generally does not have that experience of this is what we need to do when a war happens, like South Sudan has, like now the northern part of Sudan has, and other countries have. Mike, let me come to you in the studio, hatuja kusikia.
Ni mitambo.
Yes. Let us know, like what your three-dimensional perception of all these conversations that have been happening here in the studio.
Let me say one thing. I think what this conversation first allows us to have is to want to know more, because very many people are cognizant of the war in Gaza, Russia, Ukraine, whatever, but not many Africans are aware of what's going on, the conflict like in the DRC, Sudan, South Sudan, the conflict that's going on. Not many people know. And sometimes I take this as an opportunity, because listening to Dr. Wangusi talk, he's like talking about things that there was a meeting here, or there was this here, and I'm like, how did he know this? But I'm like, it's a matter of just being aware, being in the know. Again, also, is our media participating in what's going on? Are they informing us adequately? Are they informing us as it needs to be? We know that the Associated Press was banned from the White House. That one we know very well.
Yes.
Because they opted not to say Gulf of America.
Gulf of America, yeah.
Vitu kaa hizo watu wanajua. Lakini even a simple conflict that is going on, the ramifications of having the RFS, or is it RSF?
RSF, yeah.
And the implications, the diplomatic role, you know, and I think we haven't talked about that AI generated video.
Yeah.
But these are the moments that make us say that we need to know more about ourselves. We need to know more about what's going on with our neighbors.
Now you see, there's a problem in Kenya, and I don't know that it's only in Kenya or in most African countries.
Let's look at Kenya first.
Yeah, in that there's a lack of presentation of foreign politics issues, geopolitics. There's a domination of local breadbasket, dancing in funeral kind of politics.
100%.
Yeah, there's a domination of that.
Yes.
So there's kind of a blindness most of the population has.
Because the only time, for example, when you talk about foreign whatever was, you know, Baba running for AUC.
And it was being presented as a local political race.
Yes.
That's how it was being presented by the media.
You remember there's a time there's some guys who had gone to
That is so true.
Obina's show, and they were saying hata kama tunataka kufanya maandamano tutafanya nini, hatuwezi kata tikiti.
So those things, they're entertaining.
Yes.
But this is the problem of having a population that's generally very, I'm not even going to say uneducated. Uneducated is a strong word.
No.
But generally unaware of major geopolitical events.
Yes.
That could potentially affect the country.
100%.
Now, one thing that I think, of course, Ruto knows is that Kenyans tend not to pay attention to this. So those are things that people are not going to have.
He doesn't care, no.
When it comes to election time, no one is going to be thinking that I'm not going to be voting for him or her because of this foreign policy issue or this geopolitical. That never comes to play.
Hasla wa Wilbaro.
Yeah.
Ako pale Mukuru ama whatever.
I'm not even concerned about Hasla, because in defense of our hustlers is that they don't necessarily have time to they're searching food for their families, and they don't have time to.
And that's the thing. No, that's what I'm talking about.
But what I'm talking about is the so-called the 10%, the educated 10%.
Oh,
This is the group that needs to be aware of these things. But there's such a lack of awareness that when you bring up this topic, that people are even wondering, you know, like, why are we talking about this? One of the reasons why the results of AUC came as a shocker is because people are not aware of geopolitical events that were happening that would make these other countries not vote for Kenya. Because when it comes to voting at the African Union, this, you know, like talking in funerals or standing on top of cars is not going to help you. Remember, we lost to Djibouti. Djibouti, I think, has only 7 diplomatic missions across the 50-something, 54, 55 countries of Africa. Kenya has, I think, 33, 34. I don't know how many. Raila, you know, did shuttle diplomacy in more than 20 countries. The Djibouti foreign minister went to very few countries. His campaign, it was silent. It didn't have all the razzmatazz and all the drama and all the theatrics, but he did what was needed to be done. The Kenya one, they were very loud in a lot of this capital. There's something that PLO referred to as the Nairobi syndrome.
Yes.
Whereby Nairobi, you know, like diplomats are from Kenya, or other Kenyan groups have been known to go to places and be boisterous, you know, kind of like in a bully mode, and where diplomacy is silent. You know, diplomacy that works is silent. But now you go there with hundreds of people. You're filling the streets in Addis Ababa. Everyone knows the Kenyans are around, and then you go and lose the election, and then Kenyans are surprised. How did this happen when this thing, our local MCA told us it's a sure bet?
Ali, do you really think it was that? You know, when I heard you say that, in my mind I was saying, okay, fine. The guy may have worked, the Djibouti guy may have worked silently in the background,
Yes.
right? But I didn't feel like, I didn't get that based upon what we were seeing on paper. It was basically regional block related. The voting was, it was down to regional plus religious. It wasn't about the diplomacy part of it. At some point, initially, they they seemed to have been stuff that was happening, and maybe it was the SADC thing that threw everybody off.
So,
but I
Let,
honestly
let me
think-
just let me just chime in here briefly.
Go ahead.
So the point of view and what we are traditionally used to, I think this is generally a good thing. I think it is generally a good thing. But Kenyan foreign policy has been very passive, right? We've been the gentle people, gentlemen, gentlewomen of African politics, where we are investing ourselves very heavily in peace and stability in the region by hosting international bodies. This is not the first time we are hosting a regional parliament. I think it's the third one, right? To a regional government. There was Somalia, there was also South Sudan, sometime in the past. Remember when Somalis started throwing chairs at each other in, I think it was in either Bomas or KICC. So we've been very heavily invested in the peace, right? We're the ones who won the peace for South Sudan. We've played a strong role in peace in the Horn of Africa. We've played a strong role in peace in Congo and in Rwanda and other places. But a good foreign policy, and this is the truth, is also focused on the economic benefits to your homeland, right? When the Germans are heavily invested in the peace in Rwanda and Congo, it's because they are focused on the minerals. That's their focus. They're not focused on. You hear the EU has signed these big deals. Now, the question I want to ask Kenyans, we are sending the best of us to parts of the world to keep the peace, but we come back with nothing. And that is not selfish. That is geopolitics, right? So what I think Ruto is doing, which, this is one of those rare moments where I somewhat agree with him, is that he's repositioning Kenya's foreign policy to benefit Kenya economically, because we are no longer a low income country dependent on aid. And now, as we see the world changing with the US aid being closed down, right-wing governments around the world kind of becoming more assertive and internal facing, we have to also start benefiting from our engagements in the region. If and don't quote me on this, I think that's a misnomer if I'm saying it online, but if what we're going to get is the benefits of the mineral trade out of Sudan, or oil out of South Sudan, by our positioning or aligning with certain political actors there, man, so be it. Because UAE, Saudi Arabia, many countries in the Middle East, including the US, that's why they're there. That's why they invested there, right? That's why that war is going on. We've been heavily invested in the peace in Congo, but the mineral wealth is off to Europe and other foreign capitals. Why should that be okay, right?
Now.
So I think there's a case to be made that what I'm seeing generally is that Ruto's foreign policy is slightly different, because he's not playing the peace. He's also trying to position Kenya to benefit, because the Haiti deployment, which I don't necessarily agree with, has positioned Kenya both militarily but also to benefit from military aid from
what
from
benefit?
around the world.
Hold on. What
So there's
benefit?
Now, let me pause you there for
What
a minute.
benefit?
Let me pause you there, because there are so many points where we will respectfully disagree, because there's certain things. What you're talking about is Trump diplomacy. Now, Trump diplomacy is where, like what he's doing now in Ukraine, whether it's gonna work or not, is like, if you want me to help you, give me those oil fields or that.
Why is that not okay?
Wait a second. Wait a second.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you a chance. Where I say it's not okay, when you're not a superpower like the United States, or have some kind of power like either China or Russia. This is my theory here. You might be talking about this, that this is William Ruto making a foreign policy play, but he's made a series of very bad decisions from when he started. I personally do not think this is the point that the good decisions are going to start coming in. And here's why I say this. I strongly feel some of these decisions that are being made are not his decisions. He's very likely indebted to so many outside forces. And now it's collection time. You know, like whoever he had agreements with, whatever they had done together, whether it was financing his campaign or whether it was working with them or whatever it was, it's payment time. Because some of these things that are being done are not necessarily directly with the thinking that this has a possibility of potentially benefiting Kenya. There may be, I feel like there's a blackmail syndicate from outside whereby there are powers that are telling him, you now have to do this. Because Ruto right now, and part of the reason why he has also lost a lot of respect from most of these African leaders who decided not to go with him, is Kenya, especially under Biden's administration, Kenya had squarely been labeled, not even necessarily labeled, it had squarely become America's puppet, meaning anything you want, anything America wants, we are going to do it without questioning. And that goes back to the decision he made to immediately support Israel, even before, you know, like the smoke had cleared out after that initial attack.
Yep.
And this is starting to have repercussions. A foreign policy decision he made, it has had very, very ugly repercussions.
Even the DRC comments.
So I understand. Nathan, maybe you like that Trump style of diplomacy, but the problem here is that we are not a superpower. So we're in a position where if any of these major powers decides to attack Kenya through proxies, it's a possibility. All these countries that were peaceful, we never thought anything could happen. Proxies have come in and they've been able to start conflict. So I think this is a point where, because right now we don't know, maybe later on in hindsight, we might see the benefit or we might see the consequences that might come out of it. But based on the decision-making history of the president we have, he has a very long list of bad decisions. Uno Mike, let me come to you, and then we're going to go back to Dr. Wangusi.
So, I mean, here's the thing. It's again, from the little that we know, it's been blunder after blunder. We've had this conversation even before the show started. Picking the brains of a friend of mine was here, and just talking about it. And you know, you have very many scholastic people talking about it, addressing this matter and saying that the way this matter was handled is not good. For example, PLO Lumumba saying that first you have to understand the conflict. But what he was questioning was, why would you call the French president pertaining to a matter that is African?
And then those same African countries,
Yes.
they're trying to divorce from the French.
The West African countries themselves, who are French colonies,
They're trying to divorce.
they have divorced. It's only that the person who's being divorced is fighting. Is trying to stay like is trying to put a claim, but the countries themselves said we are done. So why would you call that guy instead of not also mentioning that, let's also mention the fact that, SADC already had forces on the ground trying to, because it's an agreement, they already over there. So you are burning bridges. I was saying this. Kenya has been known, Nairobi has been known to be a place, I would call it the equivalent of Switzerland. It's neutral ground. Meaning you bring parties together, let's have a discussion, and we hash out an agreement. That is it. It doesn't matter if Ruto, somebody was saying that, Kasongo has got friends, and his friends, like the
RSF.
the guy at their boys. That is fine. As boys, you do things as boys.
Yeah.
You're the president of the country. That should not even come into the picture. Like, you're like my man. I know we are boys, but here, I am a leader. I am the president. Here, what we can do is let's agree to let the warring factions, let us hash out an agreement.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And you stand that ground.
But now, coming back to you, Dr. Wangusi,
Mhm.
is a problem here, okay, if there was a coherent foreign policy that we had, and this decision was anchored on that coherence, maybe we can say, okay, we understand that. You know, the way countries like South Africa, and even countries like Ethiopia, like there's countries that you'll see that there's a certain rhythm and rhyme to the foreign policy decisions they make. So this instance, it kind of looks like this is Ruto diplomacy.
It is Ruto diplomacy.
Yeah,
I
I agree with you.
It is
And-
Ruto
and I think-
diplomacy in the sense that he decides on something, and then the people around him, who may be competent, because of the environment that has been created, they kind of have to agree with that idea, and that goes to that that principal secretary who went and posted a fake video because there was so much hunger to try to present a certain narrative that by the time they got this video, I don't know whether he deliberately posted it knowing it's fake. I honestly just think that these guys, they talk a lot, but they're not familiar with a lot of things that are happening online. But they were so quick to impress the master that they didn't take the time even to get your team to look at the video before it's posted, but they just went ahead and posted it, and then it turned out to be a fake video. There's that hunger to throw out a narrative, which has worked politically for them, but on foreign policy and geopolitically, that same strategy has not been working properly. Dr. Wangusi.
Yeah, so I get all that, and believe me, if there's someone who has been in the thick of Rutoism, as you're describing it, that person would be me, right? And I'm not here as a spokesperson. I'm a critic, but I'm also recognizing that something about what he's doing is changing the status quo. Now, the question we're trying to answer, which I frankly don't have an answer, because he has not come out publicly and said, this is why I'm involved in South Sudan, right? He has positioned it as a relationship he formed with that's based on a relationship with the RSF, but there's no coherent reason that we can tie to. For example, there's a coherent reason we can tie M23 to Kagame or Rwanda, because we know there's that ethnic connection, right? But the RSF are not Kalenjins, or they're not of Kenyan descent, so we don't. That connection is a bit difficult for us to make. So I'm as ignorant about this as any other person out there, because we don't really know what the motivation is there. Whether the chickens have come on to roost, he has debts in the UAE, and some sheikh has called him and told him you have to pay, otherwise to pay you have to call this guy and host him in Nairobi. We don't know what the machinations there are, but what we know is what you're all describing, which is traditionally Kenya's foreign policy has been that of the peacemaker, but what we are realizing now, it has also been one of passivity, both in pursuing our military, territorial, but more importantly, our economic interests, right? We're trying to be everybody's friend, even when some of the people we're trying to be friends with don't give two hoots about that friendship, and it doesn't benefit us in any way, right? So why should we be friendly to a hostile Sudanese general when maybe we don't even have significant trade? And if we establish our foothold or a beachhead through one political actor, that can change the dynamics, right? So I think there's a change in first, there's a change in terms of Kenya's economic standing in the world, because we used to be a low-income country, and a lot of this so-called peacemaking that we did was really being driven by international bodies, right? It was the UN using Kenya as a launching pad, foreign governments kind of, coercing parties to sit down in Kenya, right? So it looked good on paper, but the question I want to ask is, how did that benefit us? Because geopolitics is about looking for what benefits you the most. And we are in a country and a region that has mineral resources, including oil. We are in a country with a population dividend. We're in a region with a population dividend. We're in a region with high potential for us to thrive economically, just even by trading with our partners. I mean, I don't see a problem if Congolese minerals are to be purified in Kenya before they go into the international market. That will benefit Kenyans. There's nothing wrong with that, because that's what the EU is doing. That is what America is doing. That's why America has footprints all over the world, right?
So,
And we are not a regional or a military power, but we have certain things that are going for us. First, we are very strategically located. We have a relatively strong army. We are relatively respected in the world, and I think I'm also departing from that mindset that Kenya needs to be passive. A passive player in regional politics by just being host to governments to come and have their negotiations there and then go off and sort their issues outside, and then the benefits are cured, go to other countries.
Well, Dr.
I'm also
Wangusi,
departing from that mindset.
It's okay to depart from that mindset, but here's the problem, and you've rightly mentioned that a lot of these peacekeeping missions were being driven by international bodies. I can also bring a counter argument that these aggressive missions are also being done on behalf of international bodies. I don't think this is something that Ruto went and spent a night and thought, I think it would be a nice idea if I contact those rebels in Sudan and tell them to come to Nairobi. There is an over 90% chance that there is some outside power that's puppeteering this move. And this is where we are here, thumping chest that we are trying to get economic benefits for Kenya. However, these economic benefits you're talking about, it would be good if this was driven by our own local foreign policy. But based on the history we have, the experience we have with this government, this is most likely strings being pulled by a power from outside to the benefit of someone that we don't know. There's some personal benefit that he might get, but I am seeing doubts with what benefit we might get now that we are almost cutting diplomatic ties with Sudan. We've seen other countries cut diplomatic ties on the African continent. No benefit has actually come out of it. So that's why, if it's a different system of foreign policy we are getting into, if it was internally driven, then there's an argument like, okay, let's wait and see. But the problem, we already know that Sudan, this conflict, has multiple proxies involved, from the US to Russia to the UAE to Saudi Arabia. So there's definitely also some outside movement that's coming on this decision. I honestly don't think that this was our own foreign policy decision, and part of the reason is because some of these decisions, they come in so randomly and rapidly that it doesn't even make any sense. I'm going to read a few comments here. Pole tumewa neglect kidogo
A
leo kwa
few.
comments.
Meteta.
Yes, we might have, like a number of comments. I'm going to start with the last ones. I'm going to slowly go back up to the to the first ones. There was a comment here that was coming from Washeke. She says, remember Nelson Mandela was labeled a terrorist for fighting against apartheid and wasn't allowed in the US for long. And then we have here, Stephen JJ says, what if they shut down the airspace? Mbuyu says, Kaongo is just so clueless. And Washeke says, I agree with you, Ali. KDF might be well trained but has not experienced conflict. And Kenyan media ni bure kabisa, Ali. They do, or rather, all they do is propagate nonsense from our politicians and reporting gossip. Then Marimo says, that's a great point, Ali. Experience over training. We cannot downplay how much Sudan can hurt Kenya. The airspace is our shortest route to most places. And then Apa Sambaza Nasema, you guys have so many problems about food, about Cha, and all that there is not time for geopolitics. Once you are well fed, then you will worry about other things. And Apa Sheke says, but if Kenya really is benefit, or is he accumulating personal wealth? I totally disagree with you, Dr. Wangusi. There is no benefit for Kenyan citizens. Omosh Fire, let me come to you, and then we're going to go to Mike, and then we're going to try to wrap up this topic. A couple of other topics I want to talk about here.
So,
Angoa.
there's basically, this whole thing with South Sudan, it's I guess at this point, to be honest, with what we are seeing and the I guess I'd say the backlash, the outcry, and everything that's happening, Saindi, your AU chairman, should come in and, in my opinion, censor Ruto. Call the guy in, call these jokers in. You guys as African Union, or should I say not African Union, or I'm calling it African Union, that's the old name, the AUC, basically the commission, right? They need to come in and get involved. And it almost seems like the involvement at the AUC level or the AU level, or our organizations within Africa, they seem to be very it's almost like they wait for the UN to come in and say something. Then is when chaps seemingly want to jump in, but our own, like, we're not policing ourselves. And and because whatever comes out of this, it will become, to me, the precedent of what would be happening with conflicts in other regions and with people taking sides, and how far one can go when you basically say, okay, I'm sitting on this side, or this is where I'm, this is my stance, here is where I am, just the same way as when Kagame came out, and pretty much called guys all the way out, SA, President, Ruto, whatever, so everybody basically at this point is got their stance and saying, this is my stance, here's where I am. But who's actually reining in the troops and telling and showing these guys, okay, collectively, this is the way that we need to have regional balance for us to coexist within the continent. At some point, somebody needs to be bigger than these egos of the guys who are sitting within the walls of their countries, or should I say within the borders of their countries, because watu wana flex. Na kuna ile ya pesa inatolewa, money is, being slid here and there. And you hear that there's a force over here that's supported by these guys, but they're really not supported. But then you hear of this, and then we wait a couple of years, then it comes out that, hey, indeed, this guy was here, or, Alus Mobutu was giving money here, or Alus Kabila was giving money here, or Alus MO1, or Alus, M7, or these guys are giving. So those things need to be curtailed, and this, or should I say now, is a time for that to happen. Because if we can't do that, then how's Africa as a continent supposed to prosper, go ahead, with all the things that we see happening outside of the continent that are aimed at bringing the continent backwards? So we, the leaders within that space, need to look at the big picture. It's no longer about them and their egos. They need to look at the regional cohesion, balance, as well as moving forward. a stance needs to be taken, and maybe this is the time when AUC jumps in.
Now, Udo Mike.
No. I was gonna say. I think at some point also I think we need to be more cognizant, educated about what's going on within our country and the nether regions. We just need to know. In addition to that, we need to learn history. Just learn history. Just know so that certain things you can understand. Like, okay, this does not make sense or whatever. Because I think
Former Minister for Education Magoha said history is a useless subject,
and that is why he's
this is part of the
And
and
problem.
that is why it's history.
No. Yeah.
That is why it's history.
Yeah, one mic. See you kuja tu pole pole.
No, and that is why it's history. So yeah, it's okay. Good riddance. Because guess what? It is important to know. And in addition to knowing, again, I will always go back to this because I think it is you, Ali, who said something about, or is it Omosh, that guys are so focused on looking for the next bread, the next shilling or whatever to feed family because of poverty. Like,
Yes.
there's nothing.
Yeah.
So you cannot understand. Very many of our people don't understand the goings on outside, let's say, of their county, Kenya at large. And that is why, when PLO was saying how some people believe that, when this notion of that Raila, if he wins, is going to be the president of Africa, how many people thought that, yes, atakuwa president
Yeah.
the Africa?
No, it's just a chair of a commission.
Exactly.
But EU has their so-called
exactly.
president.
Yeah.
But wacha nikuulize, the people mashinani
Mashinani,
huko,
yeah. No.
will they know that?
They don't know that.
No, they don't
Yeah,
know
of course
that.
they don't
And
know
that's
that,
the
yeah.
point.
Yeah. They don't know
Almost,
that.
That
They-
is the point.
Yeah.
They don't know. They just know that Raila atakwa. There's some guys like
Ataenda kutawala wa Afrika huko.
the Obina.
Mm-hmm.
He had some guys, and I mentioned this, like these guys were saying, we can't even go to fanya maandamano. Let that sink in. How are you gonna go and do maandamano for a post that does not, like,
And then
there's a lot of diplomacy that is needed.
yes.
And then
there were some silly comments coming from even members of parliament of we need to cut our funding to the African Union.
exactly,
Or
like,
we need to exit, like the African Union.
but you see that is pandering to the base.
Yes,
That
that's
is
pandering
to the base.
Yeah.
Because when you tell the base that Raila did not make it because of this, they'll be like,
So
oh,
now you
sure.
have to explain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is the void of education that void needs to be really filled in. And that is why the media, Ali has always said it, and we've always said this, that the media in Kenya is, okay, let me not say that they're bad.
There are a few bright spots.
They are very, very, they are bright spots.
There are a few bright spots, like
and
Spice now fixing the nation on MTV. So there's a few bright spots.
And when you listen to News Gang,
Yes.
they are educating. But I think it's like just over here. If you don't resonate with what my thoughts and feelings are, I will not listen to you. So if you don't resonate with me, that with what I feel that Raila should have won the presidency of the AU, I will not listen to you.
Yeah. Because
And that becomes a problem.
yeah, and one other thing before we go back to Dr. Wangusi
Yes.
and wrap this up is, out of all these, especially this conflict with Sudan, this election with AUC, I feel like there was a missed opportunity because the other thing that guy Mashinani, who was rooting for Baba, what they don't understand, they first of all don't understand how AU impacts their day-to-day life. They have no understanding of that. They have no understanding of how these regional bodies, like the East African community, they have no understanding. I hate saying this, but in a chat group of our very sophisticated members of my high school, there was a time we had a conversation, and it dawned on me that there are people, even people who are well educated, and this was, I think it was around 2020, I was talking about the East African community, and there was this gentleman who was saying, oh no, this thing was, it's no longer there, it doesn't exist. So he still had the history of the East Africa community
There
that
we
collapsed
There we
in
go.
the 70s.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, dude, East Africa community was
Yeah,
recreated in
yeah,
1999.
Where have you been?
Yeah, it was recreated in 1999.
Look at our past.
And you know, and this gentleman was actually arguing like no, until, you know, like later on I think he did some googling and realized that, and this is someone who totally for 20 years did not know that the East
And-
African community was reconstituted.
And that is the issue, because I think also
Yeah.
there isn't, I think maybe this is two-prong, three-prong, however you want to dissect it. There isn't enough, you know, like now over here, like let's say, let me look at it. You know, like everything that is going on, like with the Mandarin,
Yeah.
you are forced to be like, hey, but let me Google this. Hold on. What does the law, constitution, immigration, something? It makes you go and search. It makes you want to understand.
Yes.
It makes you. No, what? Let me. No. This is not making sense, because I'm not gonna take advice from a TikTok lawyer. Let me see what the government agency says.
Yeah.
What this means.
Mhm.
What this does, or whatever. At least that it. And I remember saying that Trump's presidency in 2016 was a curse for many, but also it was a blessing for some, because you know what? It made you want to go out.
It
and
forced you to
read.
go back and
It
read and
forced
want to
you to go
understand.
read.
Yeah.
What's happening right now in Kenya, I believe, is an opportunity for many to understand historical context, whatever goes on, geopolitical, like within now, just as, you know, relationships with our neighbors, Tanzania,
Yeah,
Somalia,
East,
Sudan,
yeah.
whatever, Wagala massacre, like stuff like that. It's just to know. I'm not saying so that you can make a political decision, but just to know, so that once you understand the workings, then your decisions will be on point.
Yeah, so
Well,
I was going to
Dr.
say,
Wangusi,
you know,
yeah.
with respect to this, specifically with respect to this Sudan situation. So as we've kind of discussed this, there's a question that came up regarding there was some disagreement that, you know, it gives no incentive or economic benefit to us for Ruto to make this to take this position, and rightfully so. You know, Ali, you were saying that, you know, unless there is some imperative, which we're trying to split hairs, figure out, okay, why is this really happening? So remember, less than a month ago, the UAE was supposed to do a state visit to Kenya, and that was reversed. So, you know, the Kenyan delegation went over there. The United Arab Emirates is I think the fifth or the sixth largest trading partner that Kenya has. Think about that. Everything from meat to charcoal to flowers, all those go to the UAE. I think the trade volume is about 450 billion Kenya shillings, which is significant. The other connection with the UAE is that the Rapid Support Force is heavily supported by the UAE because of the gold trade. So there's economic interests that are at play here. On the one hand, you have the RSF that has an economic interest in getting arms to take power. On the other hand, you have Kenya, which has an economic interest to get trade volumes through this comprehensive partnership agreement. So the fact that our president has made the decision to support the enemy of his enemy, it makes economic sense. And I don't know who else you would expect to make that decision. That's a decision that squarely falls within his sphere of influence. He's the one who has to make that decision, because I think they don't want to compromise.
So wait, so who's the
that part-
enemy?
that-
Who's the enemy of the enemy? You know, like here I'm a bit confused. Who's the enemy of whose enemy?
So RSF are not Kenya's friends. South Sudan are not our friends, right? No, I mean Sudan have never been our friends, because they they were a traditional adversary because we supported South Sudan in the peace process.
No, but we've never been adversaries. I disagree with you. We've never been adversaries with Sudan.
Let me explain. So there was Sudan, there was the and I'm saying this as an African of African descent. The perception was that South Sudanese, within sort of the regional bloc, South Sudan, I guess North Sudanese or Sudanese, the Janjaweed and the Khartoum government at the time were against black animists, Christians, right? So Kenya is a Christian nation. So
no, Kenya is not a Christian nation.
Well,
it's a
non-secular. Let me correct myself. Ali, allow me to correct myself.
Yeah, it's a non-secular.
So I misspoke. Kenya is a secular nation, but has a Christian majority. I obviously misspoke there.
Yeah.
So there's that perception. These are not factual. It's just there is a perception from the Christian majority that Sudan versus South Sudan, South Sudanese are the ones who are our friends. So the RSF and that group would have been our traditional enemies.
So
both of them, both sides, because they were killing Christians.
Dr. Wangusi,
yes.
wait. I understand the perception part, but I'm talking about, as far as enmity is concerned, the diplomacy side or the military side. When both sides, the north side of Sudan and South Sudan, when they were coming to Kenya for resolution, Kenya maintained good relations with both sides. Now I'm talking about
maintaining good relations, not going to war versus having perceptions that this is an Arab versus African conflict. That's a whole different, arena. So allow me not to get kind of lost in that rabbit hole, because all we're saying is that there are these perceptions that are out there, right? But the fact is, Sudan, not South Sudan, but Sudan has not been Kenya's traditional ally. And then within Sudan, you have these two actors, RSF and the Sudanese army. Neither one of the two have also been our allies. So Kenya has come and they've been told by the UAE that amongst these two, you should support these ones because these are our friends, or we are supporting this side. And Kenya, because of the economic imperative, because of this economic agreements with the UAE, have agreed. So whose decision is that? That's it squarely remains the decision of the president to make, right?
But now that
you either make it for the economic benefit of the country or not.
But Dr. Wangusi, that is UAE's decision. That's a decision to the benefit of the UAE, because
no, but it's also to the benefit of Kenya, because we have an economic benefit, right? Our sixth largest trading partner, 450 billion in 2024 by volume. Now, that's not money to ignore.
In the history of conflicts in Africa, there is no country that has there's no country that has benefited from starting a conflict with another country, which is why, maybe you can give us an example.
Why do countries fight wars? Yeah? Countries fight wars over resources. So whoever wins resources.
And
right?
that's why I'm asking you. That's why I'm asking you, which country has benefited economically in Africa over creating a war with another country? The beneficiaries are always outsiders. The beneficiaries are majority of the time they're always outsiders.
Ali, we agree. But what needs to change, I said this as a preface. I also said this last week.
Yeah.
And it's a very uncomfortable place for a country which has traditionally been like subservient to the West, to the East, kind of being told what to do. We are now a free people. We are also an economic power, and we need to start acting like it. And that means when it comes to making decisions that economically benefit us, we should, right? Wars are not fought because you're trying to bankrupt yourself. Wars are fought because of economic and regional interests, right? So I think there's a lot to be said on that topic. But the point the overall point I'm making is that we need to start making decisions as a country that benefit us economically, because ultimately we have a responsibility to provide for our people.
But
that's never an easy decision to make.
But also to add on to that, as we wrap,
Mhm.
all people need to just learn, study, and again, I know the problem sometimes is because of economic hardships, because most guys are not really going to anything that is concerning outside, even sometimes outside of their county. They don't care. Not that they don't care, or there's not that much information, outside the county, maybe the country. But I think the media they're doing a very good job, but what they can do is increase the reach, increase the information, just educate people. Because once the people become, I think personally that sometimes the way the political class in Kenya deals with the citizenry, and with them not knowing, they love it because they get to push and pursue their own agenda on the backs of the citizenry.
Yes, and to wrap this topic, I'll say we need to take the Asian example. Have you noticed you never see these Asian countries do the things that Africa is very easily manipulatable? Like someone will come and tell you they know some of the basic problems that you have, then they tell you, if you go fight this other side, this is what we're going to give you. When you look at the Asian countries, because the Asian countries were also colonized at some point, but you never see them having that aggression against each other, even in situations where there are like border issues or any other kinds of conflicts. You never see them. They've figured out how to sort things internally. They've been able to grow economically. Part of the reason why we have to understand as Africans that there is vested interest from the outside, and the outside I mean from Europe, China, and all these major powers, that we stay divided. When we stay divided, they benefit economically. Because part of the missed opportunity that I felt that this situation created was most of the average people do not know, like what the functions of the AU are, or maybe even outside the functions, how directly it might affect them. When you look at, for example, businesses like Kenya Commercial Bank, I want to say Equity Bank, spread wings to other East African countries and to places beyond East Africa. These things did not happen by happenstance. And that's how, Africa can grow. When you have businesses in Kenya right now, especially like in the banking sector, you have banks from South Africa that are operating in Kenya. That did not happen by happenstance. So there's something called Agenda 2063, where even LAPSET is included. The way you have a highway here, you can just decide to wake up tomorrow, drive to California, and within 2-3 days by road, you're in California. You cannot do that on the African continent. There's a project that is currently underway, and LAPSET is part of it, a highway across the continent, which is going to make things easier. There's something called the African, these acronyms are sometimes hard to remember, but there's one where Africa will become an open airspace, meaning KQ doesn't have to either be landing or leaving from Nairobi. You can get a KQ from Abuja, and it goes directly to Abidjan. You can get just like the way it's in Europe or the way it's in America. That's how our economies are gonna grow. Like if we start trading with each other, and not if we start fighting with each other. We have experience with fighting over a very long period of time. We've had countries that have been fighting each other. We've had internal civil wars.
Economies,
Those,
visa,
yeah.
travel. Like,
Yes.
Can you imagine the
Those,
amount of...
and this is now me speaking, like also as an economist, those things have not benefited any African country. And I know we are now in this age of bravado, thinking that we, a small African country, can pull moves that Trump is moving and they're going to work. Those things, they have not worked. Unfortunately, we are still very divided, and there's so many vested interests outside that want us to stay divided because they benefit. Think about the airlines that benefit the most in Africa are European airlines, especially in West Africa. You would see Nigerians, they either have to go to, they sometimes have to go to Europe to travel to another African country. Or sometimes they have to go to very far places to travel to other African countries when we have the capacity. We have Ethiopian Airlines, we have Kenya Airways, we have South African Airlines, and we have other major regional airlines
they actually use Ethiopian Airlines.
Yes, so you see,
But nothing. They don't have airlines. They don't have a
but
Nigerian airlines.
but now
I get
think
what you're
about
saying.
it. If
Yes.
Ethiopian Airlines could fly from Abuja to Niamey, to a neighboring country, because right now the way it's set up, Ethiopian Airlines, if it has gone to a Nigerian city, it either has to originate from Addis Ababa or it has to be going back to Addis Ababa. Imagine if we had airlines in the US whereby Delta can either only fly to or from Atlanta. That's how Africa is set up. Where your hub is, you either have to be living there or going there. And that's a problem. And I think it's important for Africans to understand we are not going to grow our economies by fighting other people's wars, which is what's been happening. And here I think we're going to end on a note of agreeing to disagree with Dr. Wangusi. This aggressive move, trying to create an enemy where one did not exist,
It's futile.
The ending is never
not
good.
right.
And people talk about Kenya. People think that these things happen to other countries. Guess what? All the countries where you're seeing wars break out, they're countries where people thought that, oh, this cannot happen to us. It can only happen to other people. Now, Dr. Wangusi, before we let you go, give us a brief take of now that AUC election is behind us. Just give us a brief take, 2 or 3 minutes. Where do you think Kenya's politics will now head? Let's say from now through 2025. What are a few predictions that you're gonna make?
Yeah, so I've been really trying to look into my my crystal ball to try and understand what does happen, right? Because the positioning that we expected as of Friday last week when we last spoke was, given all the bravado which you've described with Kenyan politics or whatever they call it, the Nairobi syndrome. We thought Baba was going to win this thing quite in the first round. In fact, in the first 4 rounds we knew he was winning. Then all of a sudden, it shifted. So now we, at the local level, we are back to the drawing board. Baba is back in Kenya. He's back in the political scene. He has to figure out how to realign. So what has been happening as an undercurrent is the Kenya Kwanza regime have lost popular support in central Kenya, which is the most populous region in terms of votes. And then there's some realignment between the Azimio side and Rigiji and his nascent movement to move the central Kenya vote out of the government. And then on the other side, Ruto has been on a charm offensive to other regions, to the northern part of the country with the whole ID thing that we were talking about last week, to Western Kenya, placating them by keeping them in powerful positions in government. And then also the AU move was supposed to be like the big gift to Luo Nyanza. But that has kind of backfired. And I think we'll wait and see, but I think there's going to be a lot of political realignment. Given how close we are to the election and the fact that Baba was committal, not just against the wishes of the Gen Zs, but also the wishes of his former coalition partners, he doesn't have a choice but to stay on that side. they've been kind of overtures towards him. I had, Kalonzo saying that if you want to redeem yourself, you need to come back and make peace with your former coalition partners, because they know that is the only way they can leverage him in government. Another dynamic which I've heard sort of in the woodworks is that the if Baba ODM, given that there've been kind of various pronouncements about them having a majority in government, if they move out of government, or if they position adversarial against the government, there could be some impeachments. But with Kenya's political scene, things are always shifting. I always say, we were supposed to write a Republican. No, so we wrote a parliamentary election constitution in 2019 and 5, the Bomas draft, and then we changed it quickly into a Republican one, but then the key elements of a parliamentary government are still there. So there's going to be almost always going to be a lot of realignment, political realignment, especially as you come closer to an election. We are around 2 years to the election, because we are in early 2005. The elections are in 2007, 2025. The elections are in 2027.
2.5 years,
So in Kenya, 1 week in politics is a very long time. Where we were yesterday, last week, is not where we are today.
Any possibility of a referendum?
A referendum. So there've been kind of fringe talks about, we need to get Baba into government, and the way we do that is to go back to BBI. I mean, what I know is that the political process in Kenya and the political scene, these guys can whip it up in a moment's notice. So I can't tell you that next year they are not going to be pushing this BBI agenda from government's ranks, or something similar. There has to be something to rile up the political class, or rile up the populace into the election, as we prepare for the election. So it will be very interesting to see what those realignments are. But we know a couple of things. So I always, and I lead back to this sort of discussions we've been having before. All we're doing is postulating. We don't know. There are some things we know. The things we know is that there was a UAE deal. We know that RSF is, we know these are the things we know, and these are the connections we can kind of describe or try and make sense of. So that's all we're doing here. We're trying to look at the facts, look into the crystal ball, sort of look into our history and figure out, okay, given the way this guy behaves, why is he doing what he's doing right now, right? So I think it's the same thing even with this with the question about where we're going as we head to an election. Last week it was obvious, and we knew what the political play was. We don't know what the plan B was or is. So I think there's going to be a grab for power as usual. I'm not sure I see a scenario where the Kenya Kwanza government will concede power. I don't see that scenario. So the issue is not even whether or not, in Kenya it's never whether you win or lose the election, it's whether you take power. And I think power in Kenya has always been taken through constitutional coups, unlike other regions of Africa. So there's a lot that will change. Also consider Baba is 80, so he's not the same spring check that he was before. So his political star, while it's still relevant, I think it's going to wane slowly over the years to come.
Okay, asante sana Dr. Wangusi. Very healthy conversation. A lot of things to ponder about, and of course, this is something that we're gonna follow closely, and we are hoping this is gonna, get Kenyans to want to be interested in what's happening, not only inside, but even foreign policy decisions that do come back and have an impact back in Kenya. Asante sana, Dr. Wangusi. So So hapa back in the studio, there was a video that was going around, a deepfake video, which was shared by Permanent Secretary Dr. Korir. I don't even know how you pronounce that last name.
Segoi?
Yeah. So
Segoya.
yeah, so I think here is one reason why I always tell people anything that you see out there, and there's basic ways. Nowadays we have a lot of tools. You can verify something within a very short period of time, especially when you get something that's a naked video or a naked. It's not attributed to any website. It's not attributed to any source. You need to look at it 2 or 3 times. So here we had a whole principal secretary share this video that was matching a narrative, and he even had commentary about it. And the video was by CNN's Farid Zakaria. Farid Zakaria has a very good show that comes on Sunday that's called Global Public Square (GPS), where he tries from a fairly neutral perspective. I mean, sometimes it's not, but a show that gives very good information on things that are happening globally. So this was a deep fake that was showing Farid Zakaria saying something that he actually didn't say. And maybe Omosh, to get us started with this conversation, for those who don't understand, maybe deep fake ni kitu gani? You know, like, because people hear about these terms, AI generated video, AI generated content. Like, I can take a video of you and I can take, your voice and just put words into those voice. So maybe explain to people what these things are, because I think these are things that are now being used and might already start influencing people's choices and people's decisions.
Before you go there, I just wanted to say thanks for having me on the show. We'll pick up this conversation as it evolves.
Okay, asante sana Dr. Wangusi. You're gonna come back soon. Next time utakuja studio.
Nitakuwa in person. Nilikueleza kwa nini sikuweza kuja.
No worries. Hata kama utakuja na hiyo bike yako, do you use it ama it's just a prop? Decoration.
Hiyo. Alafu unaona kuna bike, alafu unaona kuna station hapo nyuma.
It doesn't have wheels.
Kuna station hapo nyuma. Akona monitors. I think that's an all-in-one, Omosh?
Yeah.
Just a monitor.
It looks like an all-in-one.
Ni studio hapo.
It's just a monitor.
Okay. Aya, sawa, asante sana.
Yeah, actually, unajua I homeschool, so hii board, screen, kila kitu ni ya kusomesha mtoto. Ukiangalia hiyo screen vizuri, you see it as
your homeschooling is an interesting topic that we need to have a full conversation about. For parents.
I supplement. I don't fully homeschool, but I supplement.
Okay. Aya, sawa. Okay,
asante. Okay, sawa.
Aya,
asante.
Okay.
Aya. Viewers. Asanteni basi.
Okay. Aya, DJ Moshfire, talk to us about deepfakes and what they are.
So, in a nutshell, deepfakes are AI generated, and by AI I mean artificial intelligence generated audio, visual, audio and visual. How would I put it? Things that obviously are not true. So, for instance, we could take the likeness of one mic and then take his voice. Let's say he said Kuja Hapa, but once you've picked up Kuja Hapa, all you do is you use the deepfake software to type in the words of what you want, and then you basically lay it on that video, and it will generate whatever it is you want. Like now you turn that Kuja Hapa to I'm going to kill you.
Okay.
And so then now...
And then it becomes someone consuming it.
If somebody's consuming it and seeing that there's a threat, yet the original voice that was used was a greeting.
Wow. Now, the thing that scares me the most is that just from experience in WhatsApp groups, it has become so easy to deceive people. It is so easy.
It is
and even the best.
So sad. Yes.
Yeah, even the best people get deceived because there's a certain laziness that has come with, if I get a screenshot, let me just run with it.
Because we are, we've become a society of I need to be the one who's breaking the news. So you're the one who is
You wanna be fast.
You become the newscaster.
Yeah.
Wewe ndio mwenye kutangaza. The 1 o'clock news is over here, basically at the tip of your fingers. So iwe when ule mse wa 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Sa zile tulikuwa tunafanya, what was it that NBC thing that people used to buy things from? Kala ka channel. Kuna ka channel kengine ya 3 o'clock in the morning unaenda kununua mavitu.
Is it QVC?
Or something like
Yeah.
QVC, right?
QVC,
Let's
yeah.
say QVC
Yeah.
or
Or
Home
HSN,
Shopping
yeah.
Network or whatever, right? So basically, you're at 3 o'clock up in the morning and news ndio hiyo ina drop. Tuseme ya KE. By the
Yeah.
time wase hapa wanamka, we ushasambaza.
So you want to be fast.
Ushasambaza kila kitu because you are up, right? Fact check, 0. Making sure that it could be 1 or 2 3 if it's something that's supposed to be an official statement that was released by somebody. With all the different handles we have here, you have an official, say CNN, I guess I was going to call it an X handle, or there's something that's official, that where they officially remove stuff, their official Instagram page, their official Facebook page, their official X page, their official whatever it is, that is their official modus of communication. You can go there to check that and see indeed if this is what came out, and then also check the official handle of that, say, host. You can check that as well, because it would have been at, say,
Farid Zakaria.
Yeah. At CNN or whatever it is, right? It's there.
Yeah.
This is something that somebody can check.
Or you can Google. That's
Correct.
even easier.
Correct. You can do that. If it's videos, there's ways of checking those videos against something that has been released out there. When you do a search, you can take the image and say, okay, search for this image. Let's see if it has come out before somewhere or whatever. And, because a lot of times, we also see old footage now being used when people are pushing, narratives or trying to push a point. They take old footage and then interlace it with new verbiage and make it look like
they do some edits.
The footage from when there was a uprising in Libya is being used as a uprising in Kenya.
Yes, and funny thing, who did that? DCI. DCI, there was a point when there were protests in Kenya and they were trying to portray this image that people were doing crazy things. They picked up pictures from Congo, from DR Congo, from protesting.
Yes,
you
I
remember that
that
time? Yeah.
No.
Was it DR Congo or was it
Central
Burundi?
Africa? No, Central
Or
African
Central
Republic.
African Republic.
Yes.
Yeah, they didn't know there was something called image reverse search to show where the images are coming from.
Yeah. So
You think I can Itumbi and them?
Yes.
and it's really bad. So with the deepfake, what's worse about it, or the worst part about it, is that you really are able to take an image of somebody, or should I say a video of somebody, and then interlace it with new audio or whatever you want this to say, and then it comes out looking like it's legit.
Yeah.
It's straight up legit. And so if you don't go fact check, guess what? This thing is there. I mean, it's it's kind of like tuseme gani ile ya White House ya the king. Like you go to the official handle and ensure.
Yeah, and you actually check. It's there.
It's there.
You're seeing it looks fake, but when you go to the official handle, it's there.
You're seeing the thing there. So say, okay, sasa hiyo unaweza sambaza. And we always say it over here. Check. In fact, now we even say check 3 sources before you send stuff, because there is so much alternate news out here, aka lies.
The other crazy thing that's also happening, people are putting other people on porn videos. So unachukua kichwa ya Lee, you put it on top of Mandingo's head and you throw it, like
Correct.
Angalia hii hapa, angalia ile kazi ya Lee anafanya. So that's what's been happening.
It's become bad. We used to use Photoshop.
Yeah.
Those days, you don't need to do that anymore. You just type in, you get that thing, type, boom, boom, copy, paste,
Yeah.
done. And it is, it's scary.
Yeah,
It's extremely scary because when you have bad players, you know,
yes,
we always
when
talk
you have
about-
bad actors.
we always say bad actors, yes, it's bad actors is the language that's used from a security perspective. But when you have those who are normally a lot of times from within, now these ones are external bad actors. Now wanakuja na ubaya.
Yes,
That they are bad actors who are coming with badness.
with a goal, with a specific goal.
Correct.
Yes.
And the goal is to detract, destroy, blow up, whichever way you want to look at it. The bottom line of it is that the damage is already done. What you're going to be doing to undo that damage is so much. It's not worth it. Thus, the people who are affected, or if you're the one who is hapo kwa forward, unajua watu wa WNN, WhatsApp News Network yako forward.
They are very fast.
Tafadhalini, check your sources. That thing of ati forwarded as received. Apana, that's not good enough. We need to be our own keepers and stewards of correct information that we are pushing forward. And kusema kweli, there are some things that unajua, you know, they say things like CG, no publicity is bad publicity. Kuna zingine hakuna haja ya kutuma mbele, unatuma mbele ya nini.
Yeah.
This is just
There's some things that are necessary.
Yeah, it's plain outright.
Because
very nasty.
every forward you make or every share you make on social media, it multiplies. When one person shares, it tells the algorithm that people like this content. So now it's spread across a lot of other channels. Apa Hanigal Njeri, Tabitha anasema great debate and perspective from Daktari. Thank you so much, Tabitha. And then Cheke anasema agree, a very informative discussion. Yes,
that agree of Shekers, is that agree? Ebusoma hiyo.
Yeah, it has an A. It's called an A apostrophe in French.
So ni
You up, I think she was just trying to be fancy. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, I think she was just trying to be fancy,
yeah,
but
because,
yeah, but yeah, one other thing that's been happening that I think we also need to be careful about. I think people, especially schools, colleges, people need to be. You remember, like how in college we're being taught about, you know, like quoting your sources and stuff like that.
Yes.
So I think today, those kinds of classes have to be upgraded, where people are taught how, because that was writing. You are being taught when you are writing, this is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But I think people need to be taught how to process information when they're receiving it, because I think that's something that with all this new media, a lot of people are still confused.
Yeah, everybody assumes it's true.
Yeah, and people don't know how to process the information. The other problem that I see is because of availability of quick searches, people are getting into conversations that they have no business being in. Because you notice there's some people who are experts on everything, from mineral exploration to gossip within Wasafi Records. They are experts on everything.
Jack of all trades.
Yes.
You mean they are Kizito?
So they will. So in any conversation,
Nasi was a banger.
they will insert themselves. What I sometimes say is, whenever there's a discussion going on, one of the basic questions you should ask yourself before inserting yourself into that conversation is, am I familiar? Is this a field that I'm familiar with? Or is this something that I'm just going to star a hornet's nest, or to pretend like I know something that I just Googled like 2 minutes ago? And that's the reason why it's very easy for people to very authoritatively speak and say that there was no such thing as COVID. And here I'm coming as a non-health expert. Now, there's a lot of people who are non-health experts there who are arguing on the fact that this disease did not exist. People did not need to wear masks. Yet they cannot, you know, like defend themselves in the middle of people who are medical experts. And you have people who just come out. And that's the reason why you had this PS just come up and share this video,
Hey, Ali.
not looking.
Umeenda kwa COVID. Unajua COVID ni kama abortion.
Ndo hivyo sasa. So now people are inserting themselves in topics that they have no business about. And all these bad actors, like especially political actors who are looking
Yes.
to influence,
Yes.
they are very happy when they see people starting to spread these narratives. And this becomes one of the most educated generation, but at the same time, it becomes one of the most easily deceived generations. I think
they are swayed by what they see on their phones.
yes, they're swayed by what they see immediately, and people actually take action.
And run with it.
Yes, and run with it. which is very unfortunate. Now, the other conversation that we wanted to have today was regarding the DMV area, because we've been very affected by this.
What is DMV?
DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Okay.
Yes, for those who are not familiar. So this
Sheke had another agree.
yeah, so this this DC metropolitan area, it has been very affected by layoffs of federal employees. And one thing that I learned today,
the largest employer in this area?
they are very big employer.
Yeah,
I don't know about the largest, but
the
they're
largest
very
employer
very
in this area.
Yes,
Because think of that fork in the road, that letter that was sent to Kwatua in the assignment.
yes.
When they Walale. It was 2 million federal workers who got that thing.
So now think about it this way. One federal job supports like it could support up to 5 other jobs directly or indirectly. So directly is, for example, like if you're a federal contractor, that's a position that's supported by someone who's working in the federal government. And then there are people who supply the federal government. There are people who supply this contractor. So for every, I don't know, I know it's tens of thousands, I don't have the exact numbers, but think about it. For every 10,000 government employees who lose work as federal employees, there's like about 50,000. No, for every 10,000, yes, there's like another 50,000 people losing jobs directly or indirectly.
Trickle down effect.
Yes, trickle down effect.
Now, the other thing to that, Ali, and you know, this a lot of for those of us who have been in the contracting world, or should I say the Fed contracting world, it's a very interesting world. When you leave the for-profit world and you go into the government contracting world, it's very, very different.
In what way?
In terms of deliverables, in terms of I guess I'd venture to say urgency, because when you're in a for-profit world, everything is about money.
Yes.
It's all about money. It's
Yes.
not about ile kazi unafanya na
Nope.
kudeliver.
It's about the
Unaona?
bottom line.
But ukienda into a contracting world with the feds, the contracting world with the feds, which is not based upon profit, it's based upon service rendered and rendered correctly and rendered within the
Within certain
confines
parameters.
of your contract.
Yeah.
Hapo ndio sasa unaona vitu waga zinafanywa a different way, whereas let's say you're in the for profit world, na ulikuwa na job na ulikuwa na title na unapewa, I don't know, maybe a loose 80K or something like that, and you go into the federal government, should I say on the contracting side, unaweza pata hiyo same job na umepigwa bump ya 20K. And it's because, of course, there's always those negotiations, you know, around the contracts and how the contracts work. Some of those contracts are billed, basically they are billable on a daily basis, or it's a fixed contract where basically it has a fixed amount of money between period A and period B, and it is fully funded. So even if, say, Gava shuts down, those guys are still getting paid because that money was already fully funded, allocated, and has already been it's already there to pay for these particular services, and so those services will be taken care of. For instance, IT. Now, for some of us guys who are in the contract world, everything is driven by a contract. It's basically the terminology in your contract is what is. So if whatever it is that you're doing is not you're not contractually obligated to do it, then guess what? It's not your own.
Yeah.
You don't do
Hakuna
it.
mambo ya above and beyond.
No.
Yeah.
You don't do it. Because kuna ile part unaambiwa as assigned, right? Na hiyo as assigned unakuja kutoka a federal guy. So if the federal guy upstream is not there to give you the undersigned, then that means that you're going within the confines of your contract, which is already laid out. But at some point, kuna mahali unafaa kwenda kupata decision.
Yep.
Huyo msea yuko. He's part of hii 100K.
Yes.
That wametembea. Na ule msea anachukua hiyo role on an acting capacity, or until they figure out which way they're doing, is now doing that maybe across 3 different programs within, or 3 different contracts within that particular agency. So that person is spread thin. you might have to wait for 3 weeks for that decision to be made. Whereas had you had somebody, hiyo kitu inafanywa within that same day, and you move forward, na pesa zile gava are losing on this particular thing is not as much, or it could be tied to, say, financial software and licensing and so on and so forth, and you may even end up having to stop this particular application because you now don't have authorization to go and renew licenses.
Yeah, you know, even
So
in part
the-
of even in part of my dealings in my day-to-day job, where I deal with either clients who are either government contractors or direct government agencies, I've noticed there's a way, there's some rules they work with that they cannot bend. Like, for example, we typically do not give anything more. Whenever we are selling our products, we do not give invoices that are more than net 30, meaning that I will send you an invoice. It has to be paid within 30 days of delivery.
Correct.
So the government doesn't care. So there's some agencies that work on 90 days.
Yep.
And
Or 45 plus.
so you tell them, or 40, so you tell them that, oh, this has to be paid in
30 days.
yeah, they'll tell you, no, we'll go look for someone else. And there's no negotiation.
Correct.
Like you know, the first times when I was a bit new and you start, you know, like one employee from the Department of Veteran Affairs was like, he was just honest. He was like, you seem to be new, but the way government does business, this is non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gava work it's a totally different animal. It's a very different way of working. And in fact, when you come from the for-profit world and you come into Gava side, you're like, hey, something over here doesn't smell right. How come Omoshi's job is to take the server and move it from the rack to the floor? Then there's another guy who comes with a cable and plugs it.
So I guess
or unplugs. So kila mtu akona role yake na, and by the way, hizo zote ni contracts.
Yeah, so and you see the problem, I guess there's a lot of vested interests in also
Correct.
in also creating jobs whereby the government itself is interested in creating more jobs for its people. Unomai kumenyamaza sana. Ama hii topic imekubo.
No. See now, hey.
Huyo ajui hizi story. Huyu ni mtu wa shule za kusoma. Aelewi hizi vitu.
No, si lazima tusome ndio tujue.
Contracting world is,
Sasa,
is,
yeah, so
is,
those are
it is not his cup of coffee.
So contracts and everything and government and whatever.
But this area
that is something that we don't deal with, Jobo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We deal with it, but mimi, that is siko hapo.
Yeah.
So it's not like at frontline. You see, like now Ali has to call. Yeah, and your frontline or whatever. I think you.
I'm in it.
In it.
I'm deep in it. So deep it's.
So for me, I'm like, I just wake up, go do my thing, and it's a wrap.
Yeah.
So it's not I'm not participating, but I get it.
And the trickle down effect in this area. Think of it this way.
It's very deep.
They got 70,000 people who agreed, and then that's the number we were given. Now, maybe after next week, which is
and you don't know if it was factual or not.
Again, that's the number we were given.
It is Doge.
Yes, that 70,000.
The South African racist.
That 70,000 people took the
Elonia.
What is it called? The early retirement.
Yes.
No, resignation, not retirement. The resignation. There's a difference. It's not retirement. It's resignation. It was an early.
Okay.
Yes,
so.
it was an early resignation, right? So basically,
and just to be clear,
it's
not
deferred. They're calling it a deferred resignation.
And just to be clear, it's not Ali Badawi, it's just Ali.
No. Yes, it's
early.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you for clarifying.
Early.
Early.
Yeah. It's an early, or should I say, deferred resignation?
Deferred resignation.
Right?
Yes.
So they're deferring it until September. It kicks in February 28th, and you had up to February 6th to tell them, and then there was a judge who put it off, yada yada yada. And last week, by I think Thursday, guys had to say, I'm still in, I'm all in it. If you are not part of that list of the chaps who had been given walking papers because of your performance per HR, story for another day. But all in all, they are saying 70,000. Their goal was to get 100,000 people,
Yeah.
right? So let's say they even get the 100,000 people in numbers, and these people vary from somebody who is, say a GS5, all the way to an SES or an executive.
To a GS15.
So
Yeah.
kuna GS15 is chief, and there's above that, because there's some people who fall in the line above that. The
Yeah.
heads of departments,
Yeah.
or the, like say the secretary of X, right? So that level you're at SES and above, or your executive something. They have there's a thing, you're no longer in the G series.
Yeah.
They kuna vile wanasema, right? So and all of this they claim was because of the calling people to come back to work
Yeah.
in the office, and there's a staggered way that they're telling folks to come in. Supervisors and that higher management level are being told that next week by Monday they need to be in the office.
Yeah.
And then there's also a caveat to it that if you're within 50 miles of an office, you need to be in the office.
You need to be no working from home.
There's no working from there's no working from home, period.
Yeah.
Okay, unless you had prior arrangements and it is medically blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And you have already got that. Then now that one they can't mess with because it's already been.
Yeah.
Maybe wewe ni mtu, you could be in a wheelchair or whatever the case may be. But within 50 miles and you're a supervisor, you need to start on Monday. Then the next lot would be the regular employees, which is, I think, they said March 30th? By March 30th, you need to be in the office. Again, within 50 miles. If you're not within 50 miles,
Yeah.
you need to still be in the office by, I think it was July or something like that. So, or either June or July, you need to be in the office. So assume that you're at 60 miles from the office, nearest office. You will be driving 60 miles one way and 60 miles back. Or commute. Or buy a house.
Yeah.
Move. Doesn't matter.
Jisot.
Ujipange na wanakupea time na washakwambia ndio hii, it's staggered in terms of how it's getting implemented. The bottom line of it is there's no more what they call telework. There's no more remote work. And if you have to, and it's unscheduled, you talk to your supervisor. Maybe you have a sick child or something, you can do that.
Yeah.
Or you have an appointment, but it's not vile ilikuwa that watu walikuwa nafanya 3 on 2
Yeah.
or the entire 5. And I am also wondering whether in this area we have government workers who have every other Friday off or every other Monday off,
Yeah.
where you work 10, you basically work 10-hour days, and so on week 2 you would be off.
If you work 10-hour days, that means every week you have only 4 days,
No,
because that's 40 hours. 10 times 4 is 40.
Because they're doing it in a 2-week period.
Oh, okay.
They
Okay.
count it in a 2-week period, which means that you pick which week, either week 1 or week 2.
Oh, okay.
You'll have 3 days,
Mhm.
right? So if it's either the Monday or the Friday.
Yeah.
So that's how they do it. Right? it's quote unquote, it's kind of like it's deferred in a way, the way that they have it done. But anyway, bottom line of it is that think of the repercussions from a housing perspective. Think of the repercussions from now the people who are loving this are the guys who are in the city who have businesses where these guys are coming
Well, now
in.
people are coming
Now,
in.
they have to eat,
Yeah.
right? They're probably gonna rent. They're maybe gonna come back into the city and rent because
Yeah.
people had gone to the suburbs. Maybe at all in the South Carolina or Narudi.
Yeah.
You know?
But now, and okay, there are people who are coming back because workers are being forced to come in. But is in that effect being neutralized by those who are being fired?
Not necessarily, because think of it this way: it's 100,000 people,
Yeah.
and the workforce is 2 million.
We're only in DC.
In now, if we
Isn't
are to
that
do
a
DC,
high number?
if
Yeah.
we are to do DC, it's over 1 million.
Yeah.
It's over 1 million in DC.
Okay.
I can tell you that for sure. It's over 1 million. Because
Yeah.
just think of how many agencies.
So
that
they're a
we
big
have.
part of DC's economy. So
Yes, they are.
So even by firing those 100,000, when everybody comes back in, it's gonna
you will
benefit
not,
the economy.
You will not notice it. You will not notice. In fact, the guys are gonna be laughing at those jamas with those the food carts.
The food trucks, yeah,
Those wasewa lunch.
yeah.
Those guys are gonna.
Because those were the biggest losers when
those
people
guys
left
were
DC.
losers.
Yeah.
The restaurants where you go in to eat lunch and your lunch is weighed $8.99 a pound. those guys were losing.
Yeah.
A lot of them closed down. Those areas like the restaurants that were around Swahili Village in DC, around that area, all these small eateries or larger eateries are the ones that had been around because there was nobody. It was a ghost town. People were not in there other than, say, the commercial folks. Then housing is also going to be affected. Now, I think that housing market is going to go crazy. Prices are going to go up.
Now, in DC or the environs?
In DC and the environs, because people are moving back.
People are going to move back.
People are going to move back because they had that carte blanche and they all went out.
Yeah.
And people realized, I don't have enough space in my apartment.
Yeah.
So now they're going to have to
So
come
now
back.
those communities that people are moving to, like North Carolina and Anini, those may have the opposite effect.
Correct. They may have the opposite effect. Now, probably what you do is kama weni mwerevu, you leave your family huko, it's cheaper for them there. You go, you find another co-worker, vile si waga tunafanya commuting, and you have that thing of you go, you work on the board, and you have like 2 or 3 people. You get apartments with roommates. You stay there Monday through Friday, unaenda home. Unarudi. Because the option is you're coming back, because now, what's the average price for a house in DC now?
DC is crazy.
Forget DC itself. In this area, the average price of a home in this
area. So you're lucky, like if you're looking for a polite 3-bedroom townhome, even 400, it's very difficult to find.
It depends, but that's why I'm saying you're averaging at about 400, 450, let's say over half a mil.
Over half a mil. 400, that's
right.
This area.
So, and you're coming from a place where maybe you, in the height of COVID or whatever, you barely broke 250.
Yeah. Because think about it, I'm more than 45 minutes outside DC, and area yetu, there is absolutely nothing that you'll get even 600.
Your area is unique and has always been unique. But then again, you go into Howard County, Columbia, nini, bado uko tu hapo kwa half. In fact, sasa unagonga 800.
Yeah.
Ukienda 700, 800. I mean, until you gonga where the bridge collapsed. If you're lucky, you might get under 300. If you're lucky.
So you have to go to Uko kwa kina one mic.
Uko kwa kina one mic, and you buy what do you need? You need a t-shirt ya Tusker na nini?
And Timberlands.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
and
just to dispel the rumor,
you
can find a house for 600,000.
No, we're not saying that. We're saying the average. We're saying there 600s are gonna be there. They're in every, but
it's exclusive.
But the 600K how Uko. Sasa Uko area to 600 is a regular townhome. It's a regular townhome, and even sometimes you might be lucky if it has a basement.
So
it is that bad.
Yes. 600K is gonna get you a single family home.
Yeah.
4-bedroom, basement, garage, 2-door,
nothing,
an acre,
nothing in
close to half acre to an acre, right?
Depending on the area, but
you're getting land. You're getting a lot of land. See, easy then use 100 by 100. Or is it Finje by 80?
I'm wondering how it is in places like Texas. What Texas tell us? How are the property values looking there?
Unajua wase wa Texas, baridi right now imewachapa slaps.
Okay, ndio maana sheka hapa is on a great.
No, but they're always complaining about heat. They're always complaining about
They do complain about heat.
They do, but now the weather patterns lately
has gone. So
imewafanya 1-2.
History yetu ya federal workers, more to come. And you know when we will find out the repercussions? We'll find out the numbers after Friday, because Friday is the last day. Next Friday. Next week Friday is their last day in the office. That's it.
Yeah.
And by the way, a lot of us guys, we were being told, Nani is leaving and Atoka, and now you have this week to pick up their brain. Na unimse ameka hapo that day, yes. Na yende amekuwa kungangana na hii kitu. So you're supposed to pick their brain in these 4.8 days, which they know they are done. Do you think this guy is even opening his mouth?
I think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Dems wamesema, you know what?
Let
us wait. No, let us wait.
Until when things are flaming.
No, until wacha tungoje the opportunity. So I did not like, so I was watching Oliver and John Oliver on his last week.
Or Trump 2.0.
Last week, and he was talking about like Hakeem Jeffries was pointing out this New York Yankee batter. He had a very bad percentage during the World Series and they lost. So it was a bad analogy. But anyway, I think it's one of those of you have to wait for the right pitch to swing. I think the Dems so far, hopefully, wamejua that kazi ya Republicans is to just throw stuff.
Yeah.
With the hope that you're going to bite. And the hope of you biting for them is an added distraction. It's an added tumewapatia kitu ya kufukuza.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just hold and wait, because this guy is going at another pace, it is unprecedented. So the joint chief of staff, the black guy, has been fired, has been let go.
Yeah.
The acting ICE guy has been let go because I think the guy is not...
He's not deporting people fast enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a matter of time. But because it's 1 month. It's just been 1 month. Think about that.
Correct.
1 month.
Yeah.
Gade, 1 month. It's just been 1 month. The guy was sworn in Korea last month, 20th.
Yeah.
Today's the 21st. 1 month.
1 month.
Yeah.
My big question is the Republicans who are getting laid off. What's going through their minds? I'm trying.
It's not a layoff. It's not a layoff.
Yeah, I'm trying to be very empathetic, because I think they honestly.
I'm sorry, I'm not.
No, wait. I think they honestly.
I'm not.
They didn't see this coming.
No,
I'm not.
No, they didn't see this coming.
I think they didn't see
Nobody
this
saw
coming.
this coming.
Yeah.
And by the
Because-
way, this is unprecedented, and yet folks are claiming
What
that
they thought.
everybody else has
Yeah.
done it. That's
What they
BS.
thought,
Yeah.
ideally, was DEI peoples are getting...
They're gonna get
Shafted.
kicked out, and then
Yes.
and then us guys will take over all
everyone
those
else.
positions.
Not knowing that most of the recipients of SNAP
Ni wao.
ni wazungu.
Yeah.
Simple.
But
Yeah.
wale watu wa firing si ni wale watu wa cautions. Zile cautions za HR.
Hata DEI,
Wako wengi. Na hao wote si walipigwa gari.
hata DEI, most of the beneficiaries is white women.
It's white women.
Yeah.
So, blacks are just like, oh,
Yeah.
Okay, we'll wait and see.
Okay.
unaget.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, let's just chill. Let's wait. Because if you guys remember, those idiots that had sued for this thing for college for acceptance.
Affirmative action. Yeah.
See, those Asians thought that they would get because they were thinking blacks. So
Yeah.
no. Blacks ended up just being constant. Their numbers went down. So now they were suing because that there was discrimination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There'll be a ton of lawsuits.
But
At the end of the
that's
day.
okay, because you guys heard what the petulant Mandarin was talking about, because he got into an argument with the governor for Maine, talking about that they have to accept whatever he had passed or executive orders. Anyway, it's on social media, and then the madam governor was like, "Yeah, we'll see you in court."
Yeah.
But at some point, this is just the first month. We have
4 years
23 months
4
to
years
go.
and 11 months to go.
No.
3 years and 11 months.
No, 23 months.
Oh, you're talking about two midterms.
Midterms.
Yeah.
Well, before we even
Lakini
get...
midterms
before
inakaa
we
mbali
even
sana.
get
No,
there.
zinakaa mbali. Acha
Yeah.
tungoje tuone, because guess what? Again, there was, when there are so many motherfuckers who are just so excited about USAID or whatever, not knowing that. So I was watching an episode where Roland Martin was Korea. Not Roland Martin. I think Media Matters So Sean Hannity had James Carville.
Yeah.
Say this guy roasted Sean Hannity. But anyway, you were saying you guys are so much, like you are a guy of conservative guys, fiscal responsibility or whatever. But you know what? USAID or whatever. USAID, the money that goes to USAID is what? 4 billion?
I know it's about 1% of the overall budget.
Because the budget is about 6 trillion.
Yeah.
It's
less than 1%. Yeah.
Nakambia Sean Hannity, listen, you know what? I will give you the supposed budget for USAID. I will give it to you. I'm not even going. You know what? I'll just give it a gift. Compare that to the 6 trillion budget. 0.0014, something like that.
Yeah.
Sean Hannity was not talking. So there are so many things, but for me, the main issue is messaging. And when it comes to Democrats and how they're going to message, you need a strategy on how you're going to package this. 1 month is too soon to come up with a messaging, because these guys are going muzzle velocity. Like what's his name?
Steve Bannon's word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Relax.
But you see, the one problem that people have within the Democratic Party now, people who are Democrat leaning, is they're looking for perfection. So and that in itself is a problem. Yeah, they're looking for perfection. On this other side, they will get, someone who has 99% flaws and 1% what they want, they will go for him. But here on the Democratic side, it's the opposite. You'll get someone who has 99% what they want, 1% flaw, but we're gonna focus on that one flaw. Like I do not like the way Kamala laughs or the way she smacks. So you see, so here people, so these things become amplified. And I think this is where now any Democratic leaning person, where people have to be careful.
Not even that. I think somebody, if you guys have not been, I don't know if you guys have been watching, but Jasmine Crockett, she has been injecting.
Yeah.
Jasmine.
But now you see that kind of injection needs to be persistent. There needs to be multiple people who are doing that.
Agreed.
There's the likes of the AOCs.
But AOCs are injecting. Actually, she was quoted by this Tom Homan guy, this ICE guy. She was quoted like AOC, because she needs to be arrested or whatever, because she's educating people or whatever. AOC, those are the people that the Dems need to, because
they need to give a chance to this newer generation.
Absolutely, because those guys are going to scotch these guys, because they're very smart, articulate. Ilhan, come on. Well, Ilhan, by the way, you can come to the one, make sure.
Yeah, and people allow, people who are okay. You see, like there's that group of the squad that supported the Gaza conflict, and there's some of them who lost. So we need such people.
Cory Bush. And Bowman.
Yeah.
By the way, they have their own show in Zeteo.
Interesting. I'm going to go check it out.
They do.
We need such people who are okay. We are like, we're going to go head on. It's okay. Kani mbaya. That's what's needed.
Kaende.
Yeah. And what people also need to do is, for those people who are willing to put themselves on the line, is you support them.
Absolutely.
You support them, because this thing always happens within the Democratic Party, whereby this other side is getting people with flaws, but because they said one thing that their people like, they're getting all the support. And then on this other side, people will pick up the 1, 2, 3 flaws. You'll hear stuff like Kamala Harris isn't really that black. Yeah, so you'll hear stuff like that.
It's a matter of, listen, I remember we were having this conversation and somewhere, and somebody said something that was very interesting, to where he compared Dems and Republicans to a religious outfit.
Yeah.
he said Republicans are like Catholics. It doesn't matter which country, state, county, whatever you go. Misa ni ile ile. Worship ni ile ile. It's 1 hour, you go in, you do your thing and you roll out. Democrats ni watu wa Pentecostal. Kuna variety. Sijui kuna Anglican, sijui kuna hii, kuna what. It's so versatile. Hakuna msimamo. So then he said, but Republicans, they fall in line. Democrats want to fall in love.
Yeah.
Hiyo ndio shida.
Yeah. Na wahenga
walisema kilicho na mwanzo hakina budi kuwa na mwisho. Meli imetia nanga. We are about to wrap this puppy up. Omosh Fire Omera, what is password?
Asante wasikilizaji, wachangiaji na mafans. See us next week. We'll be here. We apologize for our FB page giving us or FP, say Facebook broadcast giving issues. It's something that is beyond our control, and we are working diligently with our software vendor to make sure that we can bring you guys Facebook back. Meanwhile, YouTube is doing its thing. It's allowing us to do what we need to do, and that's why you may see that musically we are challenged kwa sababu hapo kwa copyright. And that's why you may not have seen me kwa mitambo nikiweka vitu 1 2 3 4 5 6 au sio. So come back next week. We'll be over here. We'll be chambuaring. For those of you who live in PG County, we do have a special election that's ongoing. You need to go to the polls and elect your new county executive. There was a strong field. There was a big field of 11 people, but I think at this point, Adventure is only 3 people who are in the big running. We'll see who's got it. I have my personal candidate who I want to win. And at the rate things are going for the primary, if that particular candidate is able to win, we may just bring them here before the general election that's upcoming. So the special election is March 4th. You have up to March 4th if you want to vote ahead of time or just go to the polls. With that said, tuonane wiki ijao. Asanteni. Thank you, Daktari, for coming through as usual.
All right. Thank you so much, Omosh Fire, and thank you so much to Dr. Nathan Wangusi. Always comes with very interesting perspectives, whether we agree or disagree. But we can all agree that there was very good content that he brought in, and a lot of things to ponder about as Kenyans. And I think even as Africans, like it's very important to ponder about these things as we look towards seeing whether Africa can grow, whereby we can start trading more with each other than fighting with each other. Na kwa hayo machache, yote ambaye anataka kunipigia simu, nambari yangu bado ni ile ile 1-800 mteule. Na operator akishika simu, mwambie unataka kusema na mjukuu, na kikuuliza ni mjukuu gani, mkumbushe ni mjukuu yule yule wa Masai, because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, Masai by choice. Sichagui, sikagui, na sibagui. Kwaherini.
Aiden, Daddy loves you. Jerry, Daddy loves you. Nemo, Daddy loves you. Until next week, be blessed.
Peace. Asanteni to our fans.
Kabisa, kabisa.
Yes. We see you.